Lord of the Mysteries x Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, It's All a Dream, Cousin by ShadowPillow. Chapter 1, Stew in Apocalypses. Caution, caution. Do not read this FIC if you haven't fully completed both ORV and LoTM. They are both great novels, and I would highly recommend them. LoTM in particular, Lord of the Mysteries, has a strong mystery element, and you do not want to receive any spoilers. Same with the ORV ending. So if you're here mysteriously without knowing Omniscient Reader or Lord of the Mysteries, go check out the original novels. LoTM is legit my favorite novel of all time now, and I've read a lot. Cross-posted from AO3. Unfortunately, FFnet doesn't even have either of these great stories on their FIC list. Happy crying face, I'm mostly here, EHM, to promote the great Lord of the Mysteries and ORV to anyone here, and I suppose to confirm something to myself. In any case, use the platform that's more comfortable to you. This story is born from the desire to see Klein being cousins with people. Inspired by, Home is the Place That Makes You Feel Loved, by Kupiko. Full summary. I am Kim Dokja, said Klein Moretti, smiling, as he watched everyone in the crowd believe he was, in fact, his cousin. Caught in a dream that always started and ended in apocalypse, Klein sought to preserve his normal and familiar life of enjoying food and reclining in the living room, day after day enjoying only the simple things. After all, Klein had a goal, to preserve his humanity, so he could soon return to the world that had become precious like his own, to wake up from this nightmare-like dream. But one day, a knock came to his door, and things were no longer so simple. This is right after the king of a kingless world, when they were scattered across Seoul to familiar places. Kim Dokja, oddly enough, ends up in front of Klein Moretti's door. About this FIC. 11 chapters. Complete. A bit rushed. No almonds. Klein and Kim Dokja are sort of cousins. Chapter 1. Stew in Apocalypses. The smell of a warm, buttery stew wafted about the kitchen. Klein's hand clutched the wooden ladle's handle with a sturdy grasp, as he stirred and slowly breathed in the scents of rosemary, butternut squash, and dashes of pepper and salt. Beside the stew pot, meat was slowly simmering in a pan, having been squashed and cut to a paste. Klein smiled, satisfied. When it was time to eat, he sat down at the table alone, spooning himself a healthy portion of the stew with a sidle ladle of the minced meat. He slowly ate, savoring the taste of the slightly salted beef against the smooth but thick texture of the soup. A little less salt next time, he judged. He then stood from the table, and cleaned up the rest of the mess of the kitchen, tidying everything away. He hummed, then paused. Outside the small kitchen window, he saw the city of Seoul caught on fire. A heinous smoke was billowing from its every pore, and the city had quickly become desolately empty. No cars honking, no calls of food stands or shouting advertisements, no life, only desperate people, turning to horrid actions to survive. This is my luck, Klein lampooned in his mind, shaking his head. Even in a dream, everything will slowly turn into an apocalypse, time and time again. He resumed cleaning up his small but precious kitchen. He then reclined on his couch, watching the ceiling lights slowly spin. There was no TV anymore, even in this dream, but he found this oddly relaxing. His body felt heavy, settling into the soft touches of the couch cushions. All the small aches and pains of a human body vanished away. Then, Klein. A heavy knock and shout came from the door. Klein slowly blinked, not wanting to stand. Who is it? A neighbor? No, Mrs. Stellan Sammer had a rather poor ending, each time this nightmare began. She and her husband should no longer be alive, as with everybody else in this building, there is only the cat remaining. Yet, the knock came again. When he didn't answer, a curse bit through the door. Then, Klein watched in astonishment when a bright white light suddenly pierced his door, then swung through it, the white sword cleanly cutting the door in half. Klein, said a soft-faced man in a white coat, brushing his black hair back with his free hand. He observed Klein lying there on the couch, observed the tidy state of the room and the spinning lights, and then said, surprised, next time, answer the door. Klein slowly blinked at this strange man, standing from the couch. Who is this? He wondered. A salesman. A harbinger of the apocalypse. This was a new development of the dream, which had repeated and suddenly restarted so often. How many times had it been? Over 1,000, Klein had thought, though his awareness had drifted in and out so often, so it didn't feel as long as it should have, in the way of a dream. Yes. Who is this? Klein responded in Korean. After over 1,000 restarts, and haphazardly participating in his surroundings, he had already gotten a good grasp of the language. Don't you remember? The young man said. I'm Kim Dokja, your cousin. Klein, what are you still doing here? How did you survive the first scenario? Klein smiled politely. Did I always have a cousin in this dream? Sometimes, details were odd. Such as Mr. Huang to being his boss, Eamon driving him in a sleek sports car, Klein accidentally drinking an assassin potion from a vending machine. The dream had been very different, long ago. Klein did have a brother named Benson, and a sister named Melissa, but they weren't present anymore in this version of the dream. I managed somehow, Klein finally said, opting to be vague when the situation was still unclear. Kim Dokja's grip on his sword tightened. Ah, my cousin seems to believe I am a murderer. That's right, the first scenario's requirement in this dream is to kill a living creature. My sugar jar had been left open the night before, and there were a line of ants leading to it, Klein then elaborated. I squashed a few of the ants, and so survived. Ah, Kim Dokja smiled disconcertingly. That's good. I also killed some cockroaches. The two remained staring at each other from across the room. His cousin stared at Klein, perplexed and still holding his sword, while Klein stared at Kim Dokja, also quite perplexed by his presence here. Klein finally cleared his throat. Cousin, are you hungry? And thus Klein arranged for a quite awkward dinner, in which Kim Dokja finally explained the situation over a new batch of butternut squash soup inside of meat. Yes, after I broke the throne and became king of a kingless world. Kim Dokja looked momentarily embarrassed, but continued on, the Dokkaebi transported us around Seoul. According to that novel, we all should have ended up in the most familiar place to us. I arrived in front of your door, Klein. I was surprised that you were still living in the same place as after you moved to Korea. The throne, was that scenario 5. Usually, the scenarios would end roughly at about 50, or 20, so Klein had some time before the dream restarted again. That was good. Did we really spend so much time together? Klein then chuckled, knowing nothing. Kim Dokja's eyes then briefly flickered in the air, as if reading something. He had done this repeatedly, but each time Klein saw nothing. He assumed this was a sign that his cousin was very popular with the constellations that survivors of the apocalypse always mentioned. The dinner had been quite a strange, surreal, and awkward affair. Kim Dokja leaned forward on the table, fingers under his chin, frowning. Klein, I don't understand. Did you use the information in the novel to somehow survive? How are you living like this? A pause. There's even electricity and food. Klein smiled uncomfortably. This is by the grace of the fool, he thought without shame. Yes, it's because of the novel. He put all the blame on something else. I see. My mother was also. Klein, will you stay here? Eventually, this place too will no longer be safe. I will stay here. Don't worry. I suppose you already roughly know what will happen. Yes. A pause. Are you sure you will stay? This reminded Klein of Melissa, who had reminded him many times of something when she was unsure if Klein was really listening. Klein smiled subconsciously, his heart warming. Yes, don't worry. Then, his cousin said reluctantly, I need to go. Thank you for the meal. Stay safe, Klein. You were the only one who, he trailed off. My adult cousin can also have a rather cute expression. Klein fought the urge to ruffle his hair. This would be rather improper. In his memories, it seems like I was a rather good cousin. It would be good to not ruin this impression. You must stay safe as well, Klein then told him earnestly. If you need help, then just come back here. Yes. Thank you. Kim Dokja smiled, and this time the smile was no longer awkward, or strange, it was small and thin, but very real. Kim Dokja then stood and headed to the broken door. Kim Dokja, glancing back at his cousin with a somewhat bewildered expression one last time, finally gathered himself together, nodded, and then left. Klein stared after the mirage, wondering what exactly had happened. When Kim Dokja had been gone for quite a while, Klein then, flicking his fingers, grafted the concept of a door back onto the unbroken projection of itself, and then the door was back in place, like it had never been touched. Then everything was back to normal, the smell of sweet food rising in the air, just rightly salted, and the peaceful living room lights overhead spinning on and on. After a pause, Klein then sat back on the couch, reclining back and picking apart the entire experience. I am more coherent than before. The dream is also becoming more linear, and I can differentiate between my real experiences and the false replacements of the dream. A few days ago, I even heard a prayer from a female member of the Tarot Club, and responded directly, without the automatic prayer response functionality. I seem to be close to waking up from this dream. However, I still do not recall a Kim Dokja in any iteration of the dream, nor in real life. This does not seem to be an intervention of celestial worthy, as there is no advantage for him to take such an odd action, and besides, I am close to having successfully digested his characteristics. He should no longer have the ability to act freely. That leaves the odd nature of this dream itself. Sometimes, I had wondered if this version of the dream was meant to represent the future apocalypse of the Great Old Ones, but this dream seems to take place in the First Era in South Korea. However, given the Fool's domain over the past, it could be that this dream is in fact connected to the real past, and rather than an apocalyptic future, this signifies how the First Era truly ended, and became the Second Era. But then why does the dream restart and restart? And why did my cousin Kim Dokja appear directly to me this time? He then thought. Perhaps, is there something different about this restart? Then, in that moment, a series of bright blue screens suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. Welcome to the Star Stream. The channel #7623 is open. The service of Planetary System 8612 insists that you do not freeload. The incarnation Klein Moretti is now connected to the main scenario. Klein stared in stupefaction. This was the first time he had seen these rumored screens even after thousands of resets. Yes, something seems a little different, he lampooned. Chapter 2, Coins and Coincidences. A sub-scenario is in progress to supplement the interlude. Sub-scenario, Survival Activities. Category, Sub. Difficulty, C+. Clear conditions, survive for 10 days in the ruined city. You should eat 3 meals a day and get at least 6 hours of sleep a day. Don't forget to pay 500 coins per day before going to sleep every night. There will be a clear penalty if you violate any of these 3 rules. Duration, 10 days. Compensation, none. Failure, death. This is a scenario where a coin event is applied. All monsters in the scenario have a certain probability of dropping coins. Klein looked at the blue scenario screen, and wondered how much 500 coins meant. This seems rather expensive. In any case, to follow the rules of this dream, it looks like I have to hunt monsters to survive. This shouldn't be difficult. In the 5th scenario, or is it the 4th scenario, the monsters are still very weak. Klein left a note, with instructions to pray to his honorific name for assistance, just in case Kim Dokja did come back. He got dressed, wearing his top hat and bringing a solid cane for good measure. He also left a large bowl of food for the cat by his apartment door. Then, with some reluctance, Klein left the small apartment building that had accompanied him for years within the hazy dream, and entered the large desolate streets of Seoul. He quickly came across a series of tall complexes and business buildings. This area had been a hub for young professionals and growing industries. Before the apocalypse began, this meant the area also had many delicious spots for a quick lunch. Barbecue, tteokbokki, dumpling stew. Now, however, all the restaurants were closed, and the businesses and buildings looked defunct and overrun. For example, the large sign for the closest tall building, Mino Soft, had already almost entirely fallen off. A game company. Was this always here? Klein briefly wondered. After walking closer, he then looked at the base of the building. There was a nasty stench in the air. The entire area was covered in blood, groaning people haphazardly without arms and legs, corpses, and cages with more corpses and bloody, half-naked people. The sight was very alarming. In the past, when he had wandered the dream, he had learned to ignore it in order to focus on retaining his own humanity, as if the scenes were part of a disturbing video game meant to shake him. But now, while he was coherent, he suddenly understood that this was oddly real. He felt emotional. Is this really how the first era ended? Of course, this was only a theory. He didn't know what happened after Joe Mingrui disappeared, but he had assumed his Earth had had many more years before the first era ended. He couldn't be sure the dream was related to it. He carefully checked for Kim Dokja's presence, since this had happened nearby the apartment, but was relieved that his Kusan wasn't amidst this mess. He then classified the injured into two groups. This should be a coin farm. The injured outside the cages seemed to have been subject to retaliation for their evil deeds, perhaps from a passing wanderer. The injured inside the cages were their victims. The victims will also die if they don't receive 500 coins each day. Klein hesitated. This was a big burden. Even if he rescued them now, they would die without any more assistance. I can't take on the troubles of the world. Klein first passed a hand over his face, until his face appeared grotesque and filled with mushroom-like pores. Then he reached into the air, grabbing the master key from the historic void, then slowly opened each cage. Afterwards, he grabbed Life's cane with his left hand, and then touched each of the victims inside of the unlocked cages with its tip. Their injuries instantly healed. The key and Life's cane then disappeared back into the void. What the? Thank you, thank you. The rest just left us here. Help. Ah. What the hell are you? At least they now have a chance, Klein thought. The demon-like judge of fire sees your kind actions and applauds. Constellations that like violence sneer at your ugly face. Secretive plotter wonders where you came from. Secretive plotter recommends you explain your circumstances aloud so that the constellations can more easily understand. A constellation that likes to switch genders says that something interesting is happening over here. 100 coins have been awarded. Klein paused, perplexed, then resumed his search for monsters. So, where did you appear when we all were scattered? Asked Han Suying to Kim Dokja, as they walked over the ruined ground of Seoul. They had just fought together against the coin farm, resolved some of Kim Dokja's trauma caused by a bully via a refreshing beatdown, and then run into the injured Yu Jungyuk, who Kim Dokja was now carrying against his back. Kim Dokja paused, then said perfunctorily, I worked at Minosoft. That game company. Right. That was why you were listening to that bastard talk on and on. Some constellations are curious about your lie. Some constellations wonder about your visit to your cousin. You have been sponsored 50 coins. The constellations are cheap today. Only 50 coins. Kim Dokja ignored them and kept walking. They walked for a long time, trying to find the meteorites that the 10 evils had taken control of. Han Suying's plagiarized novel, which Kim Dokja had forcefully requisitioned by taking Han Suying's smartphone, called them sealing stones. The Korean incarnations currently thought they were a valuable and magical resource for growing stronger, but soon the meteorites would crack open and reveal the disasters of the fifth scenario. Despite this urgency, however, both Kim Dokja and Han Suying found themselves pausing in their journey, feeling off. Birds flocked overhead. A large raven cawed, causing both Kim Dokja and Han Suying to squint at the sky. Hey, Dokja. There's someone. Kim Dokja followed where Han Suying was pointing, and saw a black speck in the distance. The figure in the distance grew larger, wearing a top hat and cane. Kim Dokja squinted. It was Klein. Why is he here? Wasn't he going to hide in the apartment? Your exclusive skill, the fourth wall, is shaking. Is it because Klein isn't part of the novel? Kim Dokja felt unsettled. It had been more difficult to keep his cool face while talking to him, like he had returned to the time he was that child that had cried to Klein about his bullies at school. The memory was distant, but the slightly older Klein had consoled him, and told him that not everyone would remember him for his mother. Your exclusive skill, the fourth wall, bares its teeth. Then there was also the strong memory of the delicious stew Klein had made. The demon-like judge of fire claps her hands in excitement. Secretive plotter is curious about your cousin. Constellations that like family are happy with this development. It's okay, Kim Dokja told Han Suying. Let's wait. When Klein Moretti finally reached the three, his cousin smiled, and greeted. Hi, Kim Dokja. It's nice to meet you here. Klein stared thoughtfully at his cousin. Klein now had over 2,000 coins, as well as a small marionette monster army he had transformed into large birds overhead. This would be enough for at least 4 days. He had just decided to return home, when he had happened to take a wrong turn and gotten lost. Of course, it was impossible for a seer to become lost, but he had recently used the master key. In the end, he had run into Kim Dokja again. This seems too coincidental. Is there some sort of convergence that guided me here? No, beyonders and characteristics do not exist in this version of the dream, so this should not be the case. Then, is it Adam, or another spectator? Or is this a quirk of the dream? Kim Dokja coughed. Klein, you decided to leave the apartment. Klein nodded. The petite black-haired woman looked between Kim Dokja and Klein. Hey, Dokja, who is this? Ah, this is my cousin. Your cousin. But he's not Korean. Secretive plotter says he was also wondering this. A constellation that likes to change genders chuckles knowingly. I'm also wondering this, Klein admitted to himself. Yes, my grandmother moved to Britain, and married a foreigner. Klein moved back to Korea some years ago, Kim Dokja explained. A constellation that likes to change genders is embarrassed and disappointed at how normal this answer is. A constellation that likes to change genders says that incarnation Klein Moretti is underutilizing his potential. A constellation that likes to change genders says that incarnation Klein Moretti should also try changing genders, like her. What? A constellation that likes to change genders offers to be your sponsor. Oh, so he's your cousin once removed. Yes. Klein decided to ignore the constellation that was continuously pestering him, likely due to him accidentally revealing his faceless ability. In any case, I feel very awake now, but I am still present in this dream. My anchors must be almost fully stabilized. Is it already time? How do I wake up? Curious, Klein did a minor divination, dropping his very normal cane and using it as a dowsing rod. The cane pointed directly at Kim Dokja. Interesting. Kim Dokja, the man on his back, and the petite woman all looked at him strangely. Hey, Kim Dokja's cousin, why did you drop that cane? The woman said. Klein looked at Kim Dokja. Chapter 3, Scribbles and Imagination. The child scribbled with crayons on a notebook, an extreme expression of dedication and focus on his face. The child was in a train station, but all the adults and families around him ignored him, as if he didn't exist. The child hummed. On the notebook was a series of scrawls of drawings, of a very handsome tall man who would never give up, of a glowing white sword, of a fiery angel with a nice smile, and many other things. In the bottom right corner of the open notebook page, there was also a small scribble of a man wearing a top hat and cane, whose face had clearly English features and a somewhat deep outline. This was Klein Moretti, whose presence the child had recently discovered. Right above this, there was a tiny drawing of a warm apartment home, with a wafting, delicious stew, and a black cat that waited at its door. The child smiled brightly, eyes glued to the notebook. The child wondered what would happen next. The noisy scene of the train station continued on relentlessly. Meanwhile, the gray fog of Saphira Castle flickered. In the fool's seat, the amorphous body wearing a vest and top hat wavered, then solidified, eventually taking the form of a human with brown eyes and a somewhat deep outline. For the first time in 6 years, and far more years in the dream, the fool blinked open his eyes. I made it back to Saphira Castle. Klein touched the pulsating crimson orbs, and caught up on the residual prayers of the Tarot Club, which had all already been largely resolved by the automatic prayer functionality. He smiled, somewhat proud of their growth. From a small cult, they had become a real organization. It seems that they are doing well. In fact, They have even expanded our tarot club on their own. Now, in addition to the major arcana, we also have some minor arcana members. He had already been somewhat cognizant of this fact, drifting in the back of his mind, but now, it came to full awareness. And Celestial Worthy has been causing trouble. There was a jolt. Klein's form then shook and wavered, his hand briefly bursting into tentacles, before he forcibly returned it back into a human form. He frowned, heart beating quickly after the harrowing experience. Klein must have rushed the return process. Yes, now that I'm back in the real world, I don't feel as clear and stable as I did earlier, in the dream. Perhaps the dream has an extra stabilizing factor. So I'm still not fully stable. I still need to rest, and establish more anchors. Klein quickly did more divinations regarding the situation regarding the apocalypse of the Great Old Ones, and then followed up with some more in-depth divinations on Kim Dokja, the Kusan he was curious about. The walls and pillars of Saphira Castle suddenly shook, but he withstood it. The most ancient dream. How strange. Is this the will of that child? Having a very rough understanding of the situation, his first theories forming, Klein then slowly closed his eyes, and let his consciousness be drawn back to the dream. Kim Dokja's cousin had developed an odd habit of proselytizing. Praise the fool! Klein would exclaim, after using an odd artifact in the form of a cane he seemed to pull from nowhere. The cane would heal wounds instantly after touching a person with its tip. This had been very useful after the battle with the Disaster of Questions, where there had been many injuries, and also when passing nearby destroyed coin farms. Would you like to hear about our Lord and Savior, Mr. Fool? The responses were varied. What are you talking about? No thanks. But thanks for healing me. Mr. Fool. Sure, I'd like to hear about it. Praise the fool. Stop the bullshit. The last one was Yu Junghyuk, who Klein had taken pity on and also healed, after he had been continuously carried around by Kim Dokja. Kim Dokja was a bit nervous about letting the crazy regressor roam freely, but he had sworn to not kill Kim Dokja this scenario, only to hit him once, gently. In the end, Yu Junghyuk followed them without doing anything, which was somehow even more nerve-wracking. When Kim Dokja asked Klein about the identity of Mr. Fool, Klein seemed oddly embarrassed. Yes, well, he coughed. I don't think I'm much worse than you, cousin. Please look past it. Yes. Kim Dokja wasn't sure what this meant. Meanwhile, Han Suying, who had taken an odd liking to Klein and was always calling him so polite, laughed at Kim Dokja from behind without reserve. After Kim Dokja had regrouped with suddenly very competent and calm Yu Sangha, Han Suying's presence had caused some trouble as a previous enemy, but Klein had somehow smoothed it over with a calm chatter and introductions. His cousin, as Kim Dokja remembered, had a very stable presence. Even in the battle with the Disaster of Questions, Klein had remained calm, and only intervened in critical moments by calling down overly large ravens to block the destructive black cannon attack from harming other incarnations. The ravens had disintegrated one by one, but Klein hadn't looked bothered. His cousin seemed to have become a very mysterious and strange figure. Why did both my mother, and my cousin, who I told about the plot of TWSA, become so strange and powerful? Kim Dokja vaguely felt this was his own fault, and was annoyed by it. Your exclusive skill, the fourth wall, is shaking. The fourth wall is confused. The fourth wall has stabilized. Klein always followed them from behind after that second chance meeting in the ruins of Seoul, smiling all the while. Kim Dokja, however, couldn't help but feel an inexplicable sense of distance which was very frustrating. When Kim Dokja was being poached from Baiyang's channel to the Chinese streamer Dukgak, Klein had watched him quietly, then at the end said with some relief, "That was well done." When Kim Dokja cooked the Yanaspleta sunflower monster for Klein and Han Suying, he had smiled deeply and his eyes looked bright. "The flavor is very good," he commented. When Kim Dokja had given Yu Sangha the sedative Yanaspleta skewer, without the juice antidote, and then threatened the Olympus nebulae with her life, Klein had at first frowned, then walked away to chat with Han Suying. When Han Suying faked her death and left an avatar behind, Klein had said heavily, so she decided to leave. When Kim Dokja met the child Shin Yusung and made her his incarnation, Klein had only remarked, "It's good she has a reliable protector." When Kim Dokja had scammed the constellations during the second sponsor selection and was chased around by incarnations for his punishment, Klein had briefly looked at his wrist. When Kim Dokja had landed on the island with the disaster meteorite, flabby and wet after riding Queen Mirabad to escape his pursuers, Klein was somehow already there, and tapped Kim Dokja with his mysterious cane. "Thanks," Kim Dokja had gasped. "No problem," Klein had said, smiling. When this and that happened, even though he was there for all those moments, his cousin seemed simply to drift along with Kim Dokja with no clear motive, only watching him curiously from time to time, helping him sometimes, and occasionally enjoying food he pulled from nowhere. Then the meteorite containing the disaster of floods broke, and even in that heartbreaking moment when Kim Dokja reached for the older Shin Yusung, the disaster of floods, trying to turn a tragedy into a happy ending. He had looked back, and Klein, though his eyes were deep, though he had again nonchalantly defended the incarnations around them with odd tricks, Klein did not act to change the story. In the end, Kim Dokja had wondered briefly if he was looking at a stranger. In the end, Kim Dokja once again resolved the situation on his own. Afterwards, Yu Sanga remarked to Kim Dokja, "He really is like you, Dokja SSI. He is always calm." "Ah, I didn't mean that in a bad way." Embarrassingly, this was said right after Kim Dokja had confessed his trauma to Yu Sanga. It had all bubbled out after he met and argued with his mother for the first time after the genre of his life changed. Then he also mentioned Klein, who had been the only one who had given him a place to belong in his late teenage years, even if it was only a shabby dorm room that even his cousin did not fully own. That was now a very long time ago. "I'm sorry. It was all a joke. My family was very normal, and..." Kim Dokja reverted his words. Yu Sanga didn't say anything after that. She only offered a hand to hold as they walked. Dokja SSI. The kids came running over then. Klein observed the situation in the dream methodically and unhurriedly. Traveling like this across the broken soul had been interesting, and it was especially comfortable to be able to chat and move with other people. Han Suying had been bold and unapologetic, and was easy to start a conversation with about history and fantastical events. She was a writer. Shin Yusung was a young child who harbored a lot of guilt. Klein would softly talk with her, and secretly fulfill some wishes like magic tricks while flipping a coin. Yu Sanga was thoughtful, and though she had noticed some oddness about Klein, she hadn't commented. Instead, they chatted about classics and books of First-Era Earth. Klein, as a formidable keyboard warrior of the past, could just barely keep up with the titles she knew. Yu Junghyuk was impossible to talk to. Kim Dokja seemed to have difficulty chatting about normal topics, so instead, Klein would occasionally mention the scenery and ask about the cookable monster recipes. Of course, then there was the matter of the apocalypse. On the way, Klein was heartened to see his group help other survivors, especially Yu Sanga, who always took the initiative against the more cynical Han Suying. They even shared food and acted like volunteers in distributing supplies. Kim Dokja also helped. The demon-like judge of fire is pleased by your continuous good deeds. Constellations that like family smile at the brotherly bonds. 200 coins have been sponsored. Events seemed to always happen, however, extreme beyond what he had noticed before in the previous resets. Klein was frequently divining the danger levels of the situation, only to realize each time he rarely needed to intervene, despite the situation often appearing quite bad. This happened both times when they encountered the disaster of questions, when Kim Dokja was being suddenly chased by other incarnations for 40,000 coins, and when they fought the disaster of floods, who had turned out to be an older version of Shin Yusung. Of course, this is rather convenient for me. I can use this opportunity to expand my anchors. After all, it's easier to cultivate believers and faith in extreme environments. This will be mutually beneficial to both the believers and me, Klein excused himself. While Klein focused on minimizing the collateral damage without revealing too much to the dream, in the end, each scenario's core was taken care of without him. This was a rather strange feeling. At some point, he felt he had reasonably confirmed this was because of Kim Dokja, his cousin, who was a unique existence. Kim Dokja felt he was only truly able to reach his cousin once, when in one moment, after everything had calmed down, he noticed his cousin holding a fancy-looking letter and smiling deeply. Klein paused one day, gathered in the train station after the fifth scenario had ended. A prayer had suddenly whispered in his ear. Confident, a male, it doesn't seem very urgent, Klein analyzed. Ah, it's Leonard. He was originally planning to let the automatic prayer functionality take care of it, but when Klein realized the contents of the prayer, he decided to accept the sacrifice personally. Klein now held a finely adorned, golden-rimmed piece of paper in his hands. It was a poem. The poem read, "Mr. Fool, come wake up from your slumber. The world only seems to grow glummer. Your great exalted glory would brighten us all, as we all meet in your grand hall. And let Mr. World wake up too. Praise the fool." Klein's lips twitched. "Poet classmate, you haven't improved your poetry skills at all," he lampooned. "Didn't I say to pray only if it was urgent? What gave you this confidence? Isn't this ending a little lazy? What's this?" Before Klein could stop him, Kim Dokja had snatched the letter from his hands. His cousin's nose wrinkled. "Someone back in England joined your church." Klein coughed. "Something like that." Kim Dokja hummed. "Your Mr. Fool is sleeping. Who is Mr. World? Is he also a god? Is there a Bible or text I can read to understand your religion?" Kim Dokja asked curiously, his face very innocent. Klein was too embarrassed to talk. Kim Dokja kept pestering him. "So," Kim Dokja asked, "who's Mr. World?" Klein, after thinking about it for a very long time, finally said, "That's me. It's a codename from a chat group I was in. And I was Mr. Fool too. Are you asleep?" Klein coughed. "It's a metaphor. My poet friend, who wrote the letter, is not very good at them." "Your poet friend?" His cousin seemed very interested. Yes, Mr. Star." Klein smiled, amused. "I worked with him for some time. Perhaps, one day you can meet him." Are there more people like this in that chat group?" Klein slowly began to explain the different members of the Tarot Club, leaving many details out. Finally, Kim Dokja returned the letter, which Klein quickly and urgently sacrificed to the junk pile of Saphira Castle. Phew, my cousin can be very persistent. It was because of his cousin's aimlessness that Kim Dokja, who had subconsciously become reliant on his cousin's stable and calm presence, was surprised when Klein told him he needed to go. They had just had a meeting of kings after the sixth scenario had been announced. Only 10 people could enter. After Yu Junghyuk had abruptly dumped the responsibility of picking the last 4 people on him, Kim Dokja had originally intended to include Klein to help him stop the rampage on the little planet, but in the chaotic meeting, Klein had raised his hand and shook his head, so Kim Dokja picked Shin Yusing instead. "I'm going to go visit China," Klein told Kim Dokja suddenly, after the meeting was over. "What? Why?" Kim Dokja asked. "I need to confirm something." The look in his eyes was deep and sentimental, and so Kim Dokja found that he couldn't protest. "Just come back safely. How are you going there?" "I have a way," Klein said nonchalantly, but his words came off as rather mysterious. Kim Dokja hesitated. "I told him about the novel, so he should be fine." "I'll see you later then," Klein said. "Yes, we'll meet again soon," Kim Dokja said, acting confident. Klein then left, walking away into the distance, holding his top hat and cane. He would not return for a very long time, and in that time, Kim Dokja and his companions would complete the 6th, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th scenario. Chapter 4, Dreams and Demons. Klein stared heavily at the family eating food together at an inexpensive diner, which was barely functioning, but so far was still out of the scenarios, being in a more remote town away from the main cities of China. In China, the 5th scenario had not yet ended. Zhou Mingrui. His parents were also there. This was strange, to see his past self, and a family he had yearned to return to so often. But Zhou Mingrui looked somewhat older than Klein had been before he transmigrated, and the family looked very happy together. This is not the history I know. Klein silently left. He spent some time in the Foodaholic nation, which was now both familiar and unfamiliar. The feeling was very nostalgic, and bitter. Much of China had already been taken over by the Third Murim world, so much had already been destroyed. The situation was not very different from Korea, and when Klein entered Shanghai where he had gone to university, Klein found himself participating in strange sub-scenarios and hunting monsters to collect coins. The constellation that likes to switch genders cheers you on. Some constellations wonder when you will return to Korea. Some Chinese constellations say that the incarnation Klein Moretti is rather suitable here. You have been sponsored 500 coins. When the fifth scenario had ended and the zone of the scenarios expanded, Klein returned to the small hometown he had been raised in and, wearing a different face, donated his coins to a young man that was not him and to parents that were not his. He told them to be safe, and wrote down as many instructions as he felt could be useful. Is this a new religion of the apocalypse? Asked the mother that was not his, taking the letter. You seem to be a nice young man. I'm sure we'll get by. Thank you, the father that was not his said seriously. Klein bowed. His lips twitched. This is only my job. Praise the fool. The young man that was not him said nothing, but stared at him discerningly. Klein excused himself. Klein had just returned from his trip. After some effort, he was able to find Kim Dokja's companions in the middle of Seoul. They were apparently very popular now, but he was able to brush past the crowd and reach the clearing party. However, the news they told him was not good. What? Klein repeated with shock. Kim Dokja died. I was gone for too long. His cousin's companions looked haggard and somewhat depressed. They explained the story of the Demon King of the 10th scenario, and how the Dokubi had forced someone to play the role of the Demon King, and Kim Dokja had taken the role. They also explained Olympus' prophecy regarding Kim Dokja's death, the one he loved most would kill him. Shamefully, hang-necked, they admitted that they had all killed him together. Klein absorbed all of this information, then abruptly left, somehow unable to bear talking with them right now. Alone, he breathed out slowly, then did a divination. Kim Dokja's location. Kim Dokja's location. Klein saw flashes of a dark and red-hued place, and a face that was haphazard and almost falling apart, made up of different patched-together stories. Klein saw an ominous-looking creature fly by. Klein frowned, but was relieved. His cousin, Kim Dokja, was still alive after all, even if he looked disfigured and strange. The Demon Realm. In all of the restarts, Klein had not wandered too far before. He had stayed in Earth in a dream-like manner, the time passing quickly. He had heard of the Demon Realm from survivors in the later scenarios, but he did not know how to get there. I do have the door authority, however. I have a unique authority over space and time. This is how I arrived in China. I am just a little less practiced in this. I seem to need the spiritual coordinates to arrive there. Hello? He asked out loud, hoping any constellations might chip in. Does anybody know the spiritual coordinates to the Demon Realm? Secretive plotter wonders why you are only talking out loud now. The constellation that likes to switch genders is confused by your request. Some constellations mock your request. Constellations that like tragedy boo at your calm and collected demeanor. Klein's frown deepened. Of course, they do not understand things in the same terms that I do. How do these constellations travel around then? Did they travel? They speak like people, but perhaps they really are just stars shining in the sky. Klein realized this theory was a little ridiculous. Kim Dokia had always talked of the constellations like they were people, in any case, and Kim Dokia had an unusually thorough understanding of this world. In later scenarios, some survivors had also even mentioned meeting their sponsors directly. In any case, the constellations didn't seem to have any understanding of the spirit realm. However, the spirit realm was the medium in which divinations and teleportations could work, carrying imprints of a subtle reality. The spirit realm was an inherent property of the world that Klein could constantly vaguely sense. While the spiritual realm did not appear similar at all in this dream, at least the principles must be the same. He attempted to divine the coordinates directly himself, but blue sparks lit up his fingers, and it was uncomfortable. This was some form of resistance from the dream itself. Some constellations are alarmed, and are wondering what you are doing. Then I should ask someone in the spirit realm. Erodes. Can I summon Erodes? I left him in the junk pile of Saphira Castle. Perhaps creeping hunger and him have been enjoying each other's company, Klein thought wistfully. Klein reached into the air, and summoned a historic projection of Erodes. This was the easiest way, as Erodes was a unique existence born from the Chaos Sea. This should also summon the real Erodes. He was successful on the first try. A silver mirror laid in his palms, and immediately, the shining glass brightened, scrawled letters appearing on it. Master. Oh, exalted ruler, Grand Master. I missed you. It is I, Erodes. Did you miss me? Confetti blew excitedly on the mirror screen. Yes, Klein smiled. Some constellations are confused by the existence of this mirror. Secretive plotter urges you to explain your actions. Where are the spiritual coordinates to the demon realm Kim Dokja is in? Klein asked, not wasting time. Erodes displayed the coordinates. This is for the 73rd demon realm, Master. There are 73 demon realms. Why did they need so many? Klein nodded, then still holding the mirror, stepped sideways into a blue, vibrant and odd space. Colors deepened, then brightened, and for a moment, everything was vague and murky, looking like chicken scratch and crayon drawings. Warning. You have stepped out of the main scenario. The Service of Planetary System 8612 angrily insists you stop freeloading. Klein popped out into a realm full of red hues, smoke, and darkness, blue system messages blaring urgently at him. He ignored them. He glanced up at the sky. Amidst tall, ugly buildings, a creature with bat-like wings flopped by overhead. A demon. This looks like the right place, Klein thought. Klein observed the demon realm curiously. Despite it being called a demon realm, there were also many humans living there, and it looked very industrial, with tall buildings like First-Era Earth, except darker. Warning. You have stepped out of the main scenario. The Service of Planetary System 8612 petulantly says it will no longer support you. After bugging him for a long time, the system messages suddenly cut off with an annoyed blip. Klein hadn't been very worried about them beforehand, since most of the time he had spent in this dream was without the star stream, but suddenly he felt. He glanced down at his right forearm. The skin had just rippled concerningly, as if worms were wriggling around uncomfortably under his skin. Klein felt he suddenly could understand the accusation of freeloading. Erodes, he asked suddenly, what do you know about the nature of this dream? Master, the mirror explained eagerly, in your sleep, you seem to have entered someone else's dream. I can detect the presence of something calling itself the star stream, which is sustaining the rules of this dream. You could say that this dream is like another reality, or another dimension, but also can be influenced illogically in the manner of a dream with the usage of plausibility. Master, are you satisfied with this explanation? Yes, Klein murmured. Erodes, I will ask you more questions later. The mirror played emojis of heartbreak, and then waved a hand goodbye. Klein dismissed the mirror. This dream is certainly unique. In Saphira Castle, I had already discovered the dream was serving as an extra stabilizing presence. Could the planetary service have inadvertently been serving as a powerful anchor, simply by my existing here? And now it is no longer observing me, so I have lost a critical anchor. This seems to be proof that my anchors are not yet fully stabilized. Then I have two choices. I must leave here quickly and return to the main scenario, or I must enter a more dream-like state in order to preserve my humanity. This is the price for my current coherence. I seem to have some time, however, before I become fully unstable. First, I will find Kim Dokja. Klein cast another divination, this time dropping his cane to point the way. When he was already in the same realm, this was simpler and more familiar than dream divination. It seems he is not too far, thank you, Erodes. Klein walked on the gloomy, emptying streets, until he came across a clock shop. Kim Dokja, when Klein found him, was not in a good shape. He appeared even worse than in the dream divination, his face distorted, his nose different and slightly displaced, and there were many other things that were wrong. Kim Dokja looked surprised to see him, then casually asked about his trip to China, almost like it had been a normal business trip. I confirmed what I needed to confirm, Klein said. Is that so? That's good. At first, Klein was concerned that his distortion was similar to Kim Dokja, losing control, but he talked normally and showed no other abnormalities. Only his body was falling apart. Kim Dokja, how did you survive? Klein finally asked, after chatting and catching up about trivial matters like it was a game. Your companions said you became a demon king, and they killed you. Yes, that did happen. Do people usually survive after being killed? Kusin, you could provide some additional explanation. Then, Klein prompted. Kim Dokja reluctantly explained how, when he was outside the scenarios, he had bargained with a Weni in order to enter the 73rd demon realm during the scenario cleanup. However, because he was still technically outside of the scenarios, his body was now falling apart, and was only being held together by patchwork stories the clockmaker Aileen had transfused into him. However, he had a plan. Kim Dokja tried to leave it on this front, smiling widely and mysteriously. Klein prompted him one more time, and Kim Dokja finally revealed the situation with the revolutionaries and the demonic Duke Siswitz, who owned this industrial complex. Ah, so there is a way to enter the main scenario here. Klein was enlightened. Kim Dokja, who was still quite literally falling apart, nodded. Yes, I need to become the revolutionary, so I can join the main scenario. Klein, did you enter somehow via a subscenario? No, Klein said seriously. In fact, I will also begin falling apart soon. It would be good for me to also join the main scenario. Kim Dokja looked at him strangely. Klein, I became a constellation. Oh, so it's possible to become a constellation from being an incarnation. What exactly does this process involve? Is it similar to how one grasps and digests potions in order to become a higher being? But how is this relevant? This is why my body is falling apart the way it is, Kim Dokja said slowly, gesturing at his face. This is also why I can still survive outside of the scenarios. Normally, it would not be possible for an incarnation to bear the plausibility. Is that so? Klein had made a mistake. That's strange. It seems like everyone requires an anchor in this dream to remain intact, and the anchor is in the form of scenarios and the star stream. However, because I have a sufficient number of other anchors, I can survive as I am. Like gods, constellations similarly seem to have anchors, and so they can also temporarily survive without the stabilizing effect of the star stream. Are these anchors stories? I have some stories of my own, Klein said slowly, after Kim Dokja had stared at him silently for too long. They are stabilizing my presence here as well, but soon they will no longer be enough. This seems to have been the correct response. Then, how did you arrive in the demon realm? I had a way. Kim Dokja looked dissatisfied and puzzled. Cousin, why are you so mysterious? He remarked, slumping back. Sometimes, I don't understand you. Klein chuckled. I do have a lot of practice acting as a mysterious, powerful figure. Actually, I have even become that mysterious, powerful figure now. In that moment, Klein's cheek rippled grotesquely. He hurried to cover it, but Kim Dokja had seen. Kim Dokja blurted, Cousin, did you also become a constellation? You also didn't have a sponsor. What exactly is your attribute? Klein coughed. Please ignore that. Klein's brows furrowed. The damage was still small, but the more damage and instability he accumulated now, the harder it would be to recover the lost progress, ruining much of Klein's good work over the years. Should I leave quickly, or remain here in a more dreamlike state? How could I ignore that? Kim Dokja, with his own distorted face, said incredulously, nearly standing from the bed. Cousin, you keep too many secrets. As do you, Klein pointed out. But you already know all of mine, Kim Dokja countered. I had told you all about TWSA, and you know about my past. Klein was silent. This was true. Even if Klein himself didn't know a thing about TWSA, he did know more about Kim Dokja than Kim Dokja did about him. It was also hard to resist someone who so earnestly and truly believed he was his cousin. I am something like a constellation, Klein admitted finally. Something like. The star stream still refers to me in an incarnation. Kim Dokja nodded. Ah, so you've become a constellation, but you still have your incarnation body, he said knowingly, as if that explained everything. Klein nodded. Thank you for making up an explanation on my behalf. He didn't want to reveal that he was technically a god. Not only would it be embarrassing to admit he was the very Mr. Fool he was proselytizing about, it just wasn't wise to advertise this around, even in a dream. Because this dream wasn't his own, anyway. Kim Dokja finally stood all the way. He smiled, looking more relaxed again. All right, cousin, let's go catch some revolutionaries. I'll figure out a way for both of us, he promised. Klein smiled and moved to follow him, but paused at the doorway. This time, Klein's left hand had rippled in an ugly, inhuman manner. He had to deliberately focus to control it and remain as Klein. He grimaced. The rate is increasing. This isn't very good. Klein. Kim Dokja looked back questioningly, but Klein had already sat on the bed. He instinctively felt tired, his lids closing slowly. I shouldn't let the damage keep increasing. For now, let's do it this way. Wake me up in an emergency, Klein murmured. At least this way, I can still be here to help. If anything happens, for example, if the situation becomes truly urgent, I can teleport us both away from here. The last thing Klein saw before he closed his eyes was Kim Dokja's worried, lost face. How cute. Then he drifted off. Kim Dokja stared at his softly sleeping cousin, who was breathing quietly, sitting in a slumped position on the same bed Kim Dokja had just emerged from. Why did you come here if you were just going to fall asleep? He thought, bewildered. How did you get here from China? Was there a hidden scenario I didn't know about, or did you really somehow come from outside of the scenarios somehow? Klein. Kim Dokja felt a bit frustrated, but feeling his own face, he knew he didn't have time to waste. He left Klein sleeping there on the bed. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Guys, you have no idea how long I was trying to find fanfiction of Lord of the Mysteries crossover with Omniscient readers Viewpoint or Shadow Slave or Reverend Insanity. I finally found it, although it was short but great. So please support the author ShadowPillow for giving us this amazing fanfiction by link in description. Chapter 5, Sleepy Days. An unknown length of time later, Klein yawned, and stood up. He blearily looked around the small room, which appeared to be part of a small clock shop. There were errant gears and miscellaneous scraps of metal and glass pieces. This reminded Klein vaguely of a young, black-haired girl he knew. He smiled. Klein then left the clock shop, absently nodding at the androgynous young person that attempted to stop him, as well as the kind elderly woman with calloused hands. Are you looking for Kim Dokja? She asked. Am I? Klein mused. He then wandered into the street, and seeing some chaos, followed the current of the crowd, which was roaring and seemed oddly excited. The scene eventually became quite bloody and chaotic. Then, Klein naturally moved forward, and came across a familiar black-haired man. Vague details filled his brain, of a young, black-haired boy holding his shirt, crying, as Klein softly consoled him. The boy then rambled on and blurted details about a story about a man named Yu Junghyuk. The boy looked a little different now and older, but Klein could recognize him. This is my cousin. Klein smiled warmly, and patted his head. His now adult cousin whirled towards him in bewilderment, then touched briefly at his hair. Klein. It'll be okay. Klein looked absently around. There seemed to be some kind of war going on, and humans were ferociously fighting demonic figures. This must be Celestial Worthy trying to shake me. No, this is the novel 3 Ways to Survive a Ruined World, which my cousin always rambled to me about. Contradicting interpretations arose in Klein's mind, and without realizing it, Klein nodded and accepted them both. Klein then looked up, seeing a big, scary-looking robot on top of a metallic complex that was rapidly being crushed and ruined. A demonic voice cackled and taunted the crowd from the robot. Klein glanced at his cousin, who looked like he was quite literally falling apart, flecks of light falling off his face, and knew this was bad. "I will handle this," Klein told him. "Huh. No, I am handling this," Kim Dokja said stubbornly. Klein looked up at the robot uncertainly. No, can I even handle this? I am only a Sequence 9 assassin. No, I am a Sequence 9 seer. No, or is it a Sequence 5 marionettist? Klein felt a little confused, so he didn't say anything when Kim Dokja stepped forward again, running into the chaos. Another robot came from the sky. The demons were defeated. Kim Dokja proclaimed, "I am Yu Junghyuk." Klein was very confused. However, the first bad demon robot was defeated, so everything was fine. But then his cousin collapsed, and his face was suddenly almost gone, and light was falling off his body everywhere, like he was disintegrating. "Hey, bring more story packs, quickly." The clockmaker, who had at some point appeared, cried out. Klein was alarmed, and just started to feel more awake, when suddenly his cousin's face stabilized and began slowly patching together again, looking vaguely healthier. Klein relaxed, and a deep exhaustion fell over him again, causing his eyelids to slowly shut. The danger has passed. What the? His cousin came all the way here. Why do I have two patients again? The clockmaker exclaimed, sounding stressed. Klein woke up somewhere inside, and then saw that his cousin was leisurely reading on his smartphone. The time had passed strangely, as people intermittently came and either helped patch up Kim Dokja, or had some strange, incomprehensible conversations with him. Then his cousin abruptly jolted up, and said seriously, "That guy is in danger." "That guy? Yu Junghyuk. What? Aren't you Yu Junghyuk?" Someone asked. "Yu Junghyuk is the owner of this complex. I am not Yu Junghyuk. I need to save him." Kim Dokja began to ask the ceiling for ways to quickly travel, but he began to look more and more frustrated. Klein, seeing that his cousin was still safe, slowly began to close his eyes, feeling immensely tired. Klein, you have a way to travel to places quickly, don't you?" Kim Dokja then asked urgently, shaking him. Klein blinked. "What are the coordinates?" he asked blearily. "It's the Gilebat Industrial Complex." "The spiritual coordinates," Klein elaborated. "What are they?" Klein considered. "I don't know." "Then why do you need them?" Kim Dokja asked, frustrated. "No, never mind. I have a way." His cousin fell asleep again. Klein frowned, and tried to think for a long time. Yu Junghyuk is in trouble. Yes, this is the main character of TWSA, who Kim Dokja always talks about. He is in the Gilebat Industrial Complex. A vague sharpness seemed to return to Klein. Klein reached into the air, and blinked when a mirror appeared. He asked the mirror a question, and then answered a question in return. The mirror disappeared, and Klein snapped his fingers, and his surroundings temporarily became deep, but bright like crayon drawings, and then Klein stood somewhere else. For a moment, he was very alert and very clear as he looked around, but then he relaxed as there was no obvious danger. The Gilebat complex looked similar to the Siswitz complex which he had come from, but subtly different. There were some dangerous booming voices emerging from the complex rooftop. They sounded vaguely familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. "Is it up there?" Klein used a rat marionette to observe the situation, and saw Yu Junghyuk and an eerie young girl talking. Yu Junghyuk however was talking oddly, with the same intonations as Klein's cousin, and there was a burnt doll on his shoulder. The eerie young girl, similarly, gave off a strange impression of being much older than she appeared. Her eyes momentarily flickered to the rat Klein was controlling, and Klein quickly abandoned the marionette. Klein then divined the danger levels of the situation. The situation seems stable, he evaluated. I am not needed. Awareness again drifting, Klein wandered the industrial complex, chatting with some of the tired people, and learned that this was the Kim Dokja industrial complex, since Kim Dokja had led the revolutionaries here to overthrow the old demon Duke Gillibat. Except Klein had clearly seen Yoo Jung-hyuk standing at the roof instead. This was a bit odd. Ah, Klein realized. So this is the style. Kim Dokja and Yoo Jung-hyuk impersonated each other, and using each other's names, each took over a different complex. This is what stabilized Kim Dokja in the end. Klein thought this was quite a clever idea. He then spent some time in this area, using his coins to sample the odd dishes of the new Kim Dokja industrial complex. Most of them were very spicy. The day passed without change and listlessly. Back in his own industrial complex, technically now the Yoo Jung-hyuk industrial complex, his cousin was still peacefully sleeping for over a day. Klein had divined this in a dream. Yoo Jung-hyuk however had not appeared to take leadership of the Kim Dokja complex, so the citizens had become uneasy. This disturbed Klein's leisurely eating and resting. In fact, some people were now claiming to be Kim Dokja in order to falsely take over the complex, and a sub-scenario had even begun where the constellations were voting as to who was the real Kim Dokja. Klein, who had been absently wandering around until then, watched this scene unnoticed from the industrial complex rooftop. Klein felt he grasped the situation better now, and felt a little less muddle-headed. Yes, I am the fool, and I need more believers. I have already been preaching in this manner for some time. Klein watched the acting scenes with some amusement, then from the shadows, passed a hand over his face. When he stepped into the light, his face, body shape, and habits resembled his cousin exactly. There were many strange and exaggerated imposters out there, pretending at the heroic, mischievous, or wicked sides of Kim Dokja's personality, to the various constellations, delight, but when Klein stepped on the stage, he managed to convince them all he was the real Kim Dokja by embodying his cousin's contradictory attributes and outward confidence. What are you all doing? I am Kim Dokja, said Klein Moretti, smiling, as he watched everyone believe he was, in fact, his cousin. The demonic-like judge of fire claps her hands excitedly. The constellation that likes to switch genders squints and feels amused. Secretive plotter warmly welcomes back Kim Dokja. The prisoner of the golden headband smiles and congratulates Kim Dokja for his healthy return. You have been awarded 1,000 coins. My cousin is very popular. Klein felt very proud. Then it was time to give a speech to everyone in the dukedom, as part of stepping up as the owner of the industrial complex. This was the important part. Klein smiled, then raised his arms dramatically like Kim Dokja did when he was being silly. Do you want to hear about our Lord and Savior, Mr. Fool? Some constellations are shocked and now wonder if you really are Kim Dokja. The constellation that likes to switch genders laughs and says he knew it. Klein lectured on and on. He mentioned without shame that the revolution was all due to the grace of the fool. The demonic-like judge of fire wonders if she should convert to this strange new religion. Praise the fool. Klein finished, and then the crowd echoed after him. He felt this project was a success. Abruptly, Klein noticed a handsome, fierce-looking man staring at him from the corner of the complex. This was Yoo Jung-hyuk, who wasted no time in marching forward and grabbing Klein by the scruff of his neck and dragging him away from the podium. The masses below murmured, but Yoo Jung-hyuk and Klein were soon inside, behind some curtains. Kim Dokja, what are you doing? The man asked tightly. Klein raised a finger. Ah, you're not trying to kill me. That's an improvement. I asked what you are doing, the man growled, leaning closer. Would you like to learn about our Lord and Savior, Mr. Fool? Klein blinked innocently, feeling that this was somewhat fun. Have you finally gone insane? I'm not sure. Yoo Jung-hyuk looked deeply at him, then frowning, softly lifted him up and bodily placed him on a nearby velvet couch. He then touched Klein's forehead as if checking for a fever. This was becoming a little too intense. Klein abruptly felt very embarrassed. Kim Dokja, cousin, am I intruding on your love life? Wait, Klein blurted. I'm not Kim Dokja. Don't be absurd, Yoo Jung-hyuk said. Stay here. Klein obediently stayed, wondering what to do. His lids fluttered closed momentarily, and he yawned, feeling tired. He then drifted about on the couch peacefully. It was very comfortable. After a while, Klein heard some sizzling sounds, and a delicious smell wafted over. He subconsciously flickered his eyes open and leaned towards the smell, and his stomach growled. Unable to become unaware of the smell, he settled back into a sitting position. Is this a new type of torture? Then Yu Junghyuk returned with a plate, and the smell became stronger. Eat this, he said, placing the plate in Klein's lap. The demon-like judge of fire is having a nosebleed. The prisoner of the golden headband respectfully looks away. The constellation that likes to switch genders laughs uproariously. 1,000 coins have been sponsored. 500 coins have been sponsored. Cousin, they seem to be giving you coins like water for this scene. Klein, feeling a bit perplexed and embarrassed on behalf of his cousin, picked up the fork, and tentatively took a bite. All other thoughts vanished away. The flavor of the soft tomato complements the braised pork. The noodles have a soft, home-cooked flavor, while also having the sharp and subtle aura of a professional chef. The bok choy adds a cleansing, refreshing, but crunchy texture to the mouth. Before he knew it, the entire plate was gone. Klein looked up, then froze. Yu Junghyuk was smiling. Short. Monocles and tomatoes. Klein immediately recognized the action is completely out of character. Kim Dokja never described Yu Junghyuk as being able to smile. Klein felt as if the handsome protagonist would suddenly reach into his pocket, and pull out a monocle, and put it on his face, and say, "What an interesting development." Klein, looking like Kim Dokja, and Yu Junghyuk stared intensely at each other. Klein raised one hand, as if preparing to snap his fingers, the emptied plate and fork still in his other hand. The protagonist's smile immediately disappeared, replaced by a sudden and stormy furrow of the man's dark eyebrows. Nothing happened. "Ah, Kim Dokja doesn't like tomatoes," Klein finally blurted. "Yu Junghyuk, I am really not Kim Dokja. I'm his cousin, Kim Dokja," the man said as if he was done with his nonsense. "See, this is the proof. I ate the tomatoes, after all." Finally, Klein sighed and passed a hand over his face. His appearance rippled and changed like a magician's trick, settling on his original face. Yu Junghyuk immediately grabbed his sword. Instinctively, Klein threw the plate at him. Yu Junghyuk sliced the plate. It shattered into 100 pieces. Klein said quickly, do you want to see Kim Dokja? He's at the Siswitz Industrial Complex." Yu Junghyuk froze. Klein elaborated, some muddy memories arising. Now it's the Yu Junghyuk complex. He talks about you a lot. Did you know? He's a fan. He would say, Yu Junghyuk this, Yu Junghyuk that, Yu Junghyuk is the best, Yu Junghyuk is the worst. That guy. In the end, Klein still needed to snap to save himself. "This love affair is a little dangerous," he lampooned. Chapter 6. You stole my food. Something seemed to be a bit wrong with Klein, Kim Dokja realized soon after waking up. It had begun after he had fallen asleep after arriving in the 73rd Demon Realm. Come to think of it, has he entered the main scenario yet? Kim Dokja had been very occupied with trying to save his own life, and then Yu Junghyuk's, and had spent the rest of the time asleep to repair his body. Even though Klein had acted strangely and more forwardly, Kim Dokja hadn't been able to worry about him, because for the most part Klein's body looked okay. However, even though both Kim Dokja and Yu Junghyuk had entered the scenario safely as Demon King candidates for the 73rd Demon Realm, Klein had not. Kim Dokja remembered how his cousin's cheek had twitched disturbingly, like there had been worms writhing under his skin, and Klein had tried to hide the eerie instability. Is this what it looks like when a constellation with an incarnation body is outside the scenarios? Kim Dokja wondered, frowning. This case had never appeared in TWSA, so he wasn't sure. He thought it would look more similar to how Kim Dokja's own body was falling apart. Maybe it was because of a special story. Klein, he stood up, and immediately walked to the other bed in the room, only to stop. Klein wasn't there. The last time Kim Dokja talked to Klein, he had asked him if there was a way to quickly get to the Gilabad Industrial Complex, but Klein had acted confused and didn't know either. Wait, what about Yoo Jung-hyuk? Kim Dokja hurriedly pulled out his smartphone to read the section revision of TWSA, but everything was still the same as before. His gut dropped in dread. He had gone and inhabited Yoo Jung-hyuk's body directly to talk with Asmodeus, but it seemed that it hadn't changed anything. No, I did all that, but did Yoo Jung-hyuk die in the end? Kim Dokja's hands shook as he held the smartphone desperately. He reread the revised novel more closely, noticing something else. Klein appeared in the fourth regression, after Yoo Jung-hyuk died to Asmodeus. Kim Dokja hadn't been able to pay too much attention to this sooner, due to the urgency of the situation, but now he paused over this scene for a long time. Open corner bracket, why did you regress back then? You were too impatient. Klein Moretti said, his skin rippling like worms were crawling grotesquely underneath. I would have stopped the situation. Now Kim Dokja is gone. Close corner bracket. Open corner bracket. Yoo Jung-hyuk didn't say anything. This was that guy's cousin, so he couldn't kill him. Close corner bracket. Open corner bracket. Yoo Jung-hyuk, restraining himself, slowly walked away. Close corner bracket. Kim Dokja scrolled and scrolled, but after that, Yoo Jung-hyuk never encountered Klein again. Why did Klein appear in the next regression, even when I didn't? Klein is also still aware of my existence, and that I was somehow tied to the regressions. I don't understand. Klein, like me, is also someone outside of the novels, but even if he has some foresight into the novel like my mother, this doesn't make sense. Did he somehow regress with Yoo Jung-hyuk? From his words, it almost sounded like he was with Yoo Jung-hyuk when he met Asmodeus. No, what do I do? Both Klein and Yoo Jung-hyuk are in danger right now. The fourth wall has stabilized your mind. Kim Dokja, breathing out slowly, again desperately reread the novel for any clues as to what to do next. In that moment, the door then opened. Klein was standing in the doorframe. Kim Dokja looked at his smartphone, then at Klein, feeling a little absurd. Klein then smiled warmly and stepped forward and patted Kim Dokja's head. His eyes looked a little listless, but confused and happy. Good, you're fine, Klein said. I'm sorry, cousin. I stole your food from the one you like. We fought about it. It was very good, however. The food was good. I didn't cheat on you. I mean. It wasn't an affair. The constellation that likes to switch genders remarks that this is how it should be done. The demon-like judge of fire is embarrassed. The demon-like judge of fire waves hi to Kim Dokja. The prisoner of the golden headband coughs and says this one is really Kim Dokja after all. The abyssal black dragon laughs at you. What? After fadingly mumbling this nonsense and somehow causing all the constellations who had suddenly returned to stir, Klein then collapsed onto the other bed, falling asleep immediately. After him, in the doorway, was also Yoo Jung-hyuk, looking murderous. Kim Dokja, Yoo Jung-hyuk said, but there was a deep red flush to his neck. Kim Dokja felt even more disconcerted at seeing the person he had been worrying about so much appear on his own, looking perfectly fine. Then, I guess the novel just didn't update. Everything turned out fine. Kim Dokja, while relieved the two were okay, wondered what the heck had happened, and also worried about the future intactness of his life. He raised a finger, and asked somewhat nervously. Yoo Jung-hyuk, are you going to kill me? The demon-like judge of fire wants to cry. The constellation that likes to switch genders says that the original version was better. The constellation that likes to switch genders says you should be more cheeky. 500 coins have been sponsored. Yoo Jung-hyuk suddenly appeared even more enraged, to the point where he couldn't speak. There was a long pause in which Kim Dokja seriously wondered if he was going to die. Even Uriel seemed to think so. Yoo Jung-hyuk must have a lot of wrath to even come to the demon realm after him, and even pretend to be him. That bastard. You don't like tomatoes? Yoo Jung-hyuk then asked darkly. What? No, Kim Dokja said cautiously. Yoo Jung-hyuk didn't usually like them either. But Kim Dokja completely didn't understand the situation, or why tomatoes mattered right now. Was there ever a question like this in the ways of survival? He ate it, then said that. Who? Your cousin. He ate. What did he eat? Your cooking. Yoo Jung-hyuk nodded. Kim Dokja felt a bit jealous, glancing over at the sleeping Klein. Yoo Jung-hyuk's food is very good, after all. Then Yoo Jung-hyuk said lowly, before turning away, he looked like you. Be careful. Kim Dokja frowned after Yoo Jung-hyuk had left. The entire situation was strange. A metaphor. No, Yoo Jung-hyuk isn't usually very poetic. That bastard isn't the type. This also was never a scene in TWSA. Then, the constellation that likes to switch genders giggles. The demon-like judge of fire can't speak. 500 coins have been sponsored in apology. He said he didn't cheat, as me. Kim Dokja looked over at Klein with a complicated expression. But Klein kept sleeping. You stole my food, Kim Dokja accused finally a full day later, poking his sleeping cousin in the cheek. Since he was sleeping, he felt confident enough to let out all his complaints. How did you trick Yoo Jung-hyuk? Did you pretend to be me? What did you do? You didn't make him hate me more, did you? Why did you do that? There was no reaction. It was hard to be suspicious of or angry at a sleeping person. Finally, Kim Dokja had healed enough and went about his own business. He went to the first murum after persuading Yoo Jung-hyuk to come with him. Boo, who was growing up well, made the subscenario for them. I should introduce her to Klein later. Han Myungo, who was Kim Dokja's old boss at Mino Soft, who had improved himself after birthing a daughter, and who bragged that he had read over 300 martial arts novels, had also somehow tagged along. Of course, Jang Haeyoung, who had the unidentified wall, also came along. Yoo Jung-hyuk then, happily, reunited with his teacher, breaking the Sky Sword Saint, and won the murum martial arts competition. Kim Dokja, meanwhile, had gone to the Gourmet Association at Persephone's invitation, and won a lot of coins by betting on Yoo Jung-hyuk. Many other things had also happened, but importantly, Kim Dokja was now rich. He had over 4 million coins. He even now had a Ferrari. Importantly, the destruction of the first murum world had begun due to the overexpenditures of plausibility, and they had left breaking the Sky Sword Saint alone to deal with an outer god. They had left her, in the first murum world, to die. The mood of the party wasn't very good when the Ferrari drove them back through the portal into the familiar 73rd demon realm. There was a lot of work Kim Dokja still had to do. A second revision of TWSA had also just appeared. Kim Dokja needed to participate in the 73rd Demon King selection. To do that, he needed to go to his own Kim Dokja industrial complex. The worries went on and on. But first, he had to check in on his cousin. Klein had blinked. Kim Dokja had found him in the vast kitchen of the Yoo Jung-hyuk industrial complex, cooking dish after dish for himself. The dishes were of a large variety, some English, some Korean, and some Chinese. Klein, are you okay? Are you connected to the main scenario? Kim Dokja asked. His first questions were words of concern. Klein shook his head. I'm not as good of a cook as Yoo Jung-hyuk, he said dejectedly. Something is very wrong with him, Kim Dokja knew. Klein, even in his memories, would always present a gentlemanly smile and act politely. Even though it was nice to see this more expressive side, Klein was still in an abnormal state. He seemed more susceptible to doing or saying odd things without fully thinking it through. Are you Klein? Kim Dokja asked, hesitating only for a moment. The young man blinked. Yes, of course. Can you look like other people? Yes, I think so. This is an ability of Sequence 6, Faceless. Klein looked startled suddenly, and looked at him oddly. I'm not an assassin, he said. I don't want to turn into a woman. Are you still not connected to the main scenario? Kim Dokja asked more sternly. Klein's staring eyes became clouded again. Klein reached his right hand up, and seemingly pulled out a mirror out of nothingness. Since Kim Dokja had assumed pulling random items from the air was somehow related to Klein's attribute, he wasn't surprised by this, but he was surprised when energetic letters began appearing on the mirror's surface. Master. Rhodes is excited to see you again. The master looks somewhat strange, however. Is the master okay? Klein hesitated, pursing his lips. I'm not sure. Where did I get this mirror from? This mirror is erodes, the mirror said, the words somehow dripping with concern. Great Master, you stole me from the machinery hivemind after I kicked up a ruckus. Great Master, may I make a suggestion? Yes. You should teleport back to Seoul. The main scenario will stabilize your state again. Great Master, do you remember the coordinates? Kim Dokja watched all this in bewilderment. Yes, but I should stay with my cousin, Klein said stubbornly. Great Master, ask me a question. You can ask me 2 questions. Kim Dokja coughed, and then spoke up, may I ask a question? Klein stared at him vaguely, then nodded. Will Klein be able to simply rejoin the main scenario by teleporting back to Seoul? Klein repeated this question to the mirror. Of course. The Great Master was originally part of the main scenario in Korea, and was not kicked out from the scenarios like Kim Dokja. The star stream would not reject him. The mirror seemed to know a lot. Where did it come from? Before I met him in the 5th scenario, Klein must have done quite a lot. Anyway, let's first see if he'll be safer in Korea. Kim Dokja asked, with Klein again repeating his words, what is the situation in Korea? The mirror screen went dark, then showed a scene where Kim Dokja's companions were fulfilling the catch the mole scenario, which would easily blow up large portions of the country if the incarnations failed to catch each exploding mole carefully. However, they did not look worried at all, instead intently focused on the scene and coordinating smoothly. Kim Dokja relaxed, then told Klein, you should go back. Klein nodded slowly. Kim Dokja was just about to open his mouth to introduce BOO and explain how to return to Korea, when momentarily, a sharp focus returned to his cousin's eyes. Klein lifted his fingers, then snapped. He instantly disappeared. Kim Dokja stared wordlessly at the odd traces of childlike drawings he had witnessed in that half-second, then at his cousin's empty seat. Chapter 7. An interesting, psychotic story. You have been connected to the main scenario. The most ancient dream is observing you. The incarnation Klein Moretti can stop freeloading now. Please work hard to create an interesting story. Klein opened his eyes with a start, then remembered everything again. He rubbed his head, and looked around. He was still in the dream. 2 versions of events drifted in his mind. One version told him he was Kim Dokja's cousin, who had told him bits and pieces of TWSA. The other version remembered living vaguely through thousands of resets in the dream, until his cousin Kim Dokja knocked on his apartment door in Seoul. Klein systematically went through each memory, reconciling the 2 versions. The influence of the dream is more powerful than I expected. It even altered my own memories after I allowed myself to enter a more slumber-like state. This has happened in previous versions of my dreams as well, before I drifted here, but they were all subversions of real and existing memories. These were all new. Klein sighed. However, he felt better than ever now. The star stream was again observing him, providing him with a powerful but surprisingly unopinionated anchor, and he had also gained many new believers from his reckless and impromptu actions in the Kim Dokja industrial complex. Despite being in a dream, Klein felt that these smaller borrowed anchors should still help him, even when he eventually left the dream. After all, these people in the dream were all simultaneously real and not real. It was difficult to understand. In the end, however, Klein would always decide to treat them as real. Klein, a young boy with ruffled brown hair said, his voice hesitant. Lee Gilyoung. Klein said, smiling. It's really you. Yes. I just arrived back here. Is Kim Dokja hung okay? Klein nodded. He is still in the demon realm, competing to become the 73rd demon king. He should be fine. Yoo Jung-hyuk is with him. The boy nodded, smiling widely now, and then went off to brag to the other child that he heard the news first. Klein looked after him, his smile not disappearing. My cousins, companions are rather nice. They care about him. Inadvertently, Klein had again slipped into worrying about his cousin and feeling proud when good things happened to him. Klein shook his head, then stood up and slowly stretched. In any case, I should follow the most ancient dream's request in exchange for his continued help. This dream, after all, has overall been speeding up the process of stabilizing my humanity. Now I just have to create an interesting story. It's more difficult to be interesting when you know you must be, Klein lampooned. Doesn't it begin to feel forced? He thought about the most ancient dream, which he had once divined as a child sitting in a train station alone. What kind of story does that child enjoy? Doesn't he like watching Yoo Jung-hyuk? Yoo Jung-hyuk often acts psychotically and doesn't communicate well. After some thought, Klein waved his hand over his face, and took on the appearance of German Sparrow, the crazy adventurer. He was very self-aware. German Sparrow began systematically hunting the remaining cesspots and coin farms around Korea. His name spread far and wide for his brusque and nonchalant attitudes, entering hot zones of dozens upon dozens of hostile incarnations without hesitation, again and again. Constellations that liked violence at first hated him, and then grew to enjoy his story. Klein was now pestered by many odd constellations like the Monarch of the Small Fries and other unpleasant names. To some, German Sparrow became known as a hero. To others, he became known as a ruthless villain who hunted other villains for their coins. German Sparrow also cooked and occasionally gave food to the victims of violence he had rescued. However, he did not offer much further help. Once, a modern reporter had stopped him, for some reason still performing her former role in the middle of the apocalypse, and bravely asked him why he did what he did. German Sparrow said nothing, but shot her camera and left. The reporter however secretly had another camera recording, of a worse quality, and the footage was released amongst the human world. Now, German Sparrow was not only a name known to the constellations and locals, but also to the people beyond Seoul. He even became a topic of great debate in online forums. Klein didn't find this situation bad, but it was a little uncomfortable. Still, he kept moving, prowling the countryside, with a projection of the familiar creeping hunger constantly in his hand, and death knell in his armpit. The feeling of justice was powerful, and this was what Klein used to console himself with, while once again observing the differences between his true self and the personality of the crazy adventurer, who had become very popular. The most ancient dream is looking at you. The most ancient dream says you don't need to do this. Klein slowly dropped the gun, then expressionlessly watched the man run away. He had just busted another coin farm. He had been on the road for many days, and was feeling a bit tired. How did he know? This is the first time he's so directly spoken to me, and it's about this. Klein was just feeling a little embarrassed when the most ancient dream says you didn't want to do this. Klein instantly understood. It was like being caught as a bad actor in a play. Klein wanted to bang his head against a wall. Now he felt even worse. Why? Klein asked the sky, after taking a moment to hold it in. Isn't this what you wanted? Some constellations wonder who you are talking to. The most ancient dream says it wants what you want. Klein frowned. What do you mean? The most ancient dream didn't respond. That child. Klein moped for a bit, then eventually reverted back to his original face, to the surprise of many of the creeping constellations. Some constellations feel that they have had a heart attack. Some constellations are surprised that the crazy adventurer is the cousin of the demon king of salvation. Some constellations that liked seeing your crazy acts flee the channel. The constellation that likes to switch genders scoffs and says that this is all because they only joined halfway. The constellation that likes to switch genders says she enjoys your story, but wonders why you switched back. Constellations that support the demon king of salvation give you a round of applause. 2,000 coins have been sponsored. Normally, Klein would have lampooned at why his cousin was so scary and influential now, but he was still somewhat upset. In the end, this wasn't really what the most ancient dream wanted. Klein was a bit dejected that all of his hard acting had gone to waste. That child's taste wasn't so simple after all. The aspect of Yoo Jung-hyuk's character he liked was obviously not his insanity, or ability to cook, or his handsomeness, or what exactly is it? Klein wondered with some frustration, and realized he couldn't read a child's mind. At the very least, Klein hadn't been called a freeloader again. He gave up on being German Sparrow, and then returned to the Seoul base with the other members of the clearing group, and they welcomed Klein, who they always called Kim Dokja's cousin, warmly back. They had been working hard at the 22nd scenario while Klein had been away. What were you doing? Jung Hee-won asked curiously. I was cleaning up the countryside. Is that so? Han Suying said, inspecting him critically. Your suit looks very nice. Thank you, Suying SSI. It's very clean, she said, still circling around him. What kind of cleaning up did you do? Klein cleared his throat. This and that. Some volunteer work. Of course, I changed before coming back here. It was as easy as snapping. Always a gentleman to the end, Han Suying said, disappointed. He spent a few days there, after which a hubbub suddenly kicked up around the base. Lee Gil-young was looking excited, even though Shin Yusing was bragging to him loudly about something related to her stigma. Jung Hee-won looked happier and excited, and Lee Hyung-sung was constantly bouncing on his feet expectantly. Yu Sang-ga wore a placid smile, but her eyes sparkled. Even Han Suying acted more manic, her grin sharper, a strange tilt to her expression. Klein quickly heard the news. Yu Jung-hyuk had returned, Kim Dokja was alive, and he needed help for the Demon King selection. Only 4 team members could go due to the scenario limits. Yu Sang-ga, Shin Yue-sung, Jung Hee-won, and Lee Hyung-sung were selected by Yu Jung-hyuk after much internal debate. Klein saw a problem with this, and stepped forward. Yu Jung-hyuk SSI, I can go. Klein, who had been lazily reclining in the base for many days without anybody complaining, said. No, Yu Jung-hyuk said, without explaining anything. I'm stronger than the members of the team you selected, Klein revealed. I would be able to help more. This might be related to the most ancient dreams request. Divination shows that the situation may be quite difficult. Yu Jung-hyuk said nothing, his hand resting on his sword. Klein looked around, but no one seemed to believe him. Did I hide my strength too well? I'm not exactly weak. You're currently looking at a god, no, someone who is almost a full pillar of the universe. You're his cousin, Jung Hee-won then said, smiling and drawing him away by the arm. Just relax here with them. We'll take care of everything. Yes, Han Suying said, putting her hand on his shoulder. They'll take care of everything. Klein watched helplessly as Yu Jung-hyuk stepped into a scenario portal and disappeared, and then so did the 4 other members some hours later. Klein was left with Lee Gil-young and Han Suying. There was also Gong Pildu, who Klein didn't know, but who seemed very adept at protecting the area with his abilities. Should I intervene anyway? No, the scenario limits the number of people, and Kim Dokja and Yu Jung-hyuk already picked 6. It would be difficult to be involved by trying to break the scenario limits. Well, they're gone now, the petite Han Suying said brightly, her lips curving underneath a black bob of hair. Let's go relax. We don't need to work too hard, right? I heard one of the King of Wanderers' followers made some pretty good tteokbokki. Klein reluctantly agreed. Lee Gil-young spoke solemnly, it's not fair Shin Yusing won the coin toss. Sub-scenario, disaster. Category, sub. Difficulty, A+. Clear conditions, Olympus has set its eyes on Korea due to the Demon King of Salvation's actions. Defeat or repel the incoming disasters and Olympian constellations to survive. Compensation, 500,000 coins. Failure, the destruction of the Korean peninsula. In the middle of eating tteokbokki and chatting with Han Suying, this scenario notification arrived. They never give us a break. Han Suying railed her fist at the sky. Let's see, the scenario shouldn't be too bad, what the fuck, Olympus. Klein leapt from his stool, and the two immediately moved back to the center of the fortress with Gong Pildu, Lee Gil-young, and numerous other citizens. Fuck, if I had known it would be like this, Han Suying cursed. Red and blue flames suddenly filled the sky without further warning. A heavy pressure settled on the air. Countless messages could be heard. The constellation Son of the Blind King has descended. The constellation Lonely Lover of Alut has descended. The constellation. On the horizon, Olympian constellations could be seen like dots coming towards their fortress, wreathed in the red and blue flame. They marched over, exerting their statuses and causing everything to burn just by waving their hands. Even from this distance, some citizens already had bleeding ears. 200 meters, 100 meters, this distance shouldn't be a problem for me, Klein judged. We should prevent them from getting closer to the fortress. Klein lifted his hands, and many of the weaker Olympian constellations began to slow, twitching. He was close to grabbing full control of their spirit threads and turning them into marionettes, when suddenly blue sparks poured from his hands, then covered his body with extreme warning jolts. Klein thought he could force it, but stopped. He felt a bit frustrated with the resistance from the dream. If it's not this, if it's not that, then what is it? You have already incorporated me into this dream, so what role am I supposed to play? Or is this just a limiter on my overall capabilities? I can use abilities from every sequence, but only to a certain extent. Han Suying stared at him with some bewilderment. I guess you are pretty strong. No, hold on, this won't be enough. I have a plan, anyway, everyone, just hang on for as long as you can. What will you do? You aren't Kim Dokja, Gong Pildu grunted. Everyone had quickly reacted to the invasion. Following Han Suying's words, they did what they could to hang on. Li Gilyang was sending large insects out to hold the walls. Gong Pildu was constantly controlling turrets that fired relentlessly upon the Olympians, and Klein used other monster marionettes to assist, sometimes creating obstacles to make it more difficult for the Olympians to advance. Soon, however, they would overflow past the walls and destroy everything. Meanwhile, Han Suying carefully placed 6 black stones on the ground around her. They disappeared into the air like a sacrifice to the gods. Black Dragon, do whatever you want, Han Suying then said, grinning widely. Klein glanced at her, a powerful force seemed to be filling her body, and she raised her arms manically. A darkness filled the sky, until the sky was nothing but pure night. The blue and red flames were quenched, and massive talons suddenly slashed from the dark sky, flinging away the minor Olympians. A dragon-like face then emerged from the sky, revealing lolling, grinning teeth, consuming the entire scene in madness and disorder. The abyssal flame dragon shouts with glee. Klein stared wordlessly. He then glanced at the sparks filling his own fingers. This criterion seems quite unreasonable and arbitrary, he lampooned. At the end of the onslaught, Han Suying's Chuni dragon sponsor had defeated the Olympians, and their base in Seoul was safe, but battered. Seoul had survived another dangerous and unreasonable scenario. Communication arrived from the other side, the companions in the 73rd Demon Realm announcing that they had won the Demon King selection, and even beat Surya, a god. Klein criticized the rules of this dream. Are gods so easy to beat? Why am I so easy to beat? Then, after 2 days of reconstruction, there was a party at the Kim Dokja industrial complex. His cousin was now officially the 73rd Demon King. Congratulations, Klein told him, after Li Gilyang, Gong Pildu, and Klein had arrived in the complex through a portal. Klein waited until Li Gilyang had finished his greetings, and the party had just started to enter a swing. You worked hard. Klein observed the 73rd Demon Realm. Now, the industrial complex which had once looked so gloomy and dark, had grown grass and trees and actually looked rather nice. He then remembered fondly the many spicy dishes which he had sampled here. Thank you, cousin, Kim Dokja replied, but his eyes were strange. He seemed to have something he wanted to say. Klein waited patiently. Kim Dokja's gaze then darted around here and there, settling for a moment on Usanga dancing with another Usanga who was actually a constellation, then for a moment on Li Gilyang and Shin Yusing arguing by their feet, then finally on Klein. Kusin reluctantly opened his mouth, and said, Cousin. No, Klein, who exactly are you? Chapter 8, Non-Existent Memories. Cousin. No, Klein, who exactly are you? Klein frowned. This was a difficult question to answer. What are his intentions? Did he finally realize I am really not his, Kusin? What do you mean? He asked, finally. Kim Dokja sighed, and then elaborated, you've changed. A pause. You're keeping so many secrets. Even if you tell me one thing, there are 10 more I don't understand. How did you teleport? How did you leave the scenario? How did you become a constellation? Why did you pretend to be me? I don't mind each one on its own, but the entire picture is too much. The words and complaints seemed to keep bursting out. Klein was silent. He was unused to dealing with accusations like this. Answering one by one wouldn't satisfy his Kusin. The problem was deeper. You always have a sense of distance about you, Kim Dokja said, with frustration. It's like I can't reach you. Is this true? Klein then thought about the way he had usually acted in the dream. Is it any different? Well, even in the real world, my therapist told me to lift my mask a little. Ah, Lee Gilyoung's voice piped up. You too, Hung. Yeah, Ajusi is always gone. Shin Yusing said. Kim Dokja coughed. This conversation isn't about me. Klein was amused. Kusin, is this how you react when the tables are turned against you? See, it's that, Kim Dokja suddenly accused, pointing at him. You're always smiling, but I can't tell what you're thinking at all. You didn't used to be that way all the time, only with strangers. Klein, you're different. What do you remember me as? Klein asked curiously. You always act kind, but afterwards when we were alone together, you would point out the contradictions in people's words and actions, Kim Dokja said with frustration. In the dorm room, you would always be cooking, and then commenting about the different flavors. Then, you were often on the internet, studying random topics and typing up essays. I remember also when you told me about your failed confession, and were embarrassed even though it was many years later. Then when your parents visited, you would always chat, and, in your studies, you always. It was all accurate. Klein was quiet. Is this the power of the dream? Klein looked at Kim Dokja with different eyes. Kim Dokja truly did see him as his cousin. You failed in confessing to your crush. Shin Yusing asked Klein with great interest. But you're more handsome than Ajusi. Shish, don't interrupt. Lee Gilyoung criticized the other child. They were both watching with wide eyes like this was a soap opera. Klein cleared his throat and said, why don't you two go visit Jaehi Uni? Ew, don't call her Uni, Shin Yusing said. He's saying it from our perspective, stupid, Lee Gilyoung said. The children began bickering, but when Kim Dokja cleared his throat, they finally listened and vacated the premises. They really do only listen to him. But why does Shin Yusing always call him ugly? Children must think in odd ways. Anyway, Kim Dokja coughed, looking glad that they were gone. Klein, it's a bit shameful to say, but that time I spent with you after you moved to Korea was some of the best in my life. The military service ended it, but some constellations think this is very sweet. 400 coins have been sponsored. Klein knew it had taken a lot of courage for Dokja, who was always very outwardly confident, but inwardly unconfident in matters related to himself, to say this. Even though Klein had never seen Kim Dokja fully as his cousin except when he was in his dream-like state, he felt. Are you sure these memories are not fabricated? Around them the party went on, with dancing, chatter, and laughter. What? Are the memories fully consistent with how you have lived and thought? Are you sure they were not implanted? It really bothered Klein. When Joe Mingrui had been transmigrated into Klein, he had accepted it and decided to live as Klein. Melissa and Benson soon became shackles on his heart, and he cared about them deeply. However, that was because he had memories of them, and the life that Klein had lived with them beforehand was very real. However, Klein's memories of his time here in the dream were complete now. And Klein, in recalling each of his steps, could not remember ever being cousins with Kim Dokja in earnest. Yes, I'm sure, Kim Dokja said, but he looked perturbed. Klein, why are you asking this? The demon-like judge of fire says she's nervous about this conversation. The constellation that likes to switch genders slaps his knee and says that this is too good. The prisoner of the golden headband says to hush. The spectators, it's quite annoying that they're always watching. However, there is no way to avoid this. This situation has already gone on for too long. Klein braced himself, then spoke bluntly. I don't remember. What? I don't remember. When I did remember, they were like someone else's memories. I don't understand. Kim Dokja's expression was, then it hardened. Are you really Klein? Yes. There shouldn't have been anybody impersonating me at that time, and I don't have any missing memories. I'm sorry, Kim Dokja. The first time I met you was when you knocked on my door when the fifth scenario began. Then, Kim Dokja sputtered, looking confused. His head tilted downwards. I don't understand. I'm sorry. The kusin you know likely isn't real, Klein said mercilessly. It was better to cut out the wound before the infection spread. It was real. We spent years together. I don't understand either. You described me accurately. But I couldn't have possibly been there, and I don't remember it at all. There was a silence. Kim Dokja laughed. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. He drew his palm slowly over his face. I'm going crazy, then, why did you pretend to know me? No, thinking back, you did know too little after we met again. You were always very vague and distant. This situation is rather complicated, Klein felt regretful. I recently had some strange circumstances, Klein explained, where it was feasible that people I had known in life were rearranged in odd roles and positions compared to reality. So when you said you were my cousin, I played along. However, no matter how I tried, I couldn't remember anything about you. You were really being too mysterious, compared to reality. Rearranged circumstances. Kim Dokja hesitated. Were you always a constellation? Something like that. I'm not sure. How could you not know? It's difficult to explain. Kim Dokja suddenly looked somewhat small. I don't understand. Ah, I remember now. Once, you said you might have difficulty remembering me. I did. Yes. Some hope returned to Kim Dokja's eyes. Could it be that you had forgotten somehow? Maybe it's related to the star stream. I haven't forgotten anything, Klein said, frowning. He thought for a long time. But it might be possible it's something similar. I have a way to check. But I might not be able to confirm it. Try it, Kim Dokja urged more confidently. I will. I'll know more when I return. It may be some minutes, or some days. You can ask me then. Kim Dokja smiled, but this smile looked somewhat unlucky. Okay. Go talk with your companions, Klein then urged. The sounds of laughter and chatter still emerged around them, but Klein saw some concerned glances coming their way. The two Usangas had stopped dancing. They worry about you. Yes, yes. Klein watched Kim Dokja's back for a while, as he paused and awkwardly approached the original Usanga, then finally nodded. Then I should go check. Klein stepped sideways into the historic void. The historic void was familiar, but also vaguely different like the spiritual realm had been. Rather than crayon-like chicken scratch however, the historic void's gray fog somehow had a more fluid nature, constantly twirling and splitting. The void felt somehow more poignant, as if Klein could reach into the fog and touch it, like he could directly connect to history itself. He observed this, then moved on. I know some of Kim Dokja's past, based on the dream-like false memories I had, so it should be possible to find something. Klein followed the connected points of light, peering into different moments in the apocalypse, and step by step, found himself beside murkily lit points even further back in time, when Seoul was a normal city before everything burned. This one, Kim Dokja's college days. Klein was somewhat amazed that this point of history was lit up at all in the void, and that he could travel to it. This suggested that Kim Dokja's insistence that Klein's time with him was real had some merit. Maybe some sort of mystical connection with a different Klein in this dream was enough to establish the real Klein's connection to this piece of history. Originally, Klein had just wanted to see if Klein Dokja's kusin really did exist in the historic void, or if it was all really fake, but he had already gotten further than he had originally anticipated. If Klein was really present, then there might be additional clues. He leaned in, inspecting the point of murky light further. He stepped into that part of the void, then somehow fell into a different part of the dream, where everything became colorful again. Klein blinked, and glanced around. He knew he had fallen into the past. Rather than gray fog, a reality surrounded him. Seoul, with cars honking and passing by, pedestrians chatting, a big suspension bridge hanging over the water. This was Seoul before the apocalypse. That was strange. Not only is the spiritual realm a bit different here, but the historic void behaved oddly here. It should be impossible to directly go to the past, but instead, this dream was strangely permissive. Where am I? I was looking at Kim Dokja's past, so Kim Dokia should be nearby. For some reason, Klein was placed on a low rooftop building, but after looking around, he eventually was able to spot a familiar mop of black hair and thin features far away. Kim Dokja was on the nearby suspension bridge, set over a large black river. It was nighttime, so his features weren't very clear. Klein moved to get a better look. Something isn't right. Kim Dokja was looking down from the bridge with unfathomable, dark eyes. The young man stared at the deep water for a long time. Kim Dokja inched forward, and Klein tensed, sensing something ominous. Kim Dokja then paused, pulled out his smartphone, and read something. A great change came over him, and though his expression was still desolate and empty, he slowly stepped back. Klein quickly took control of a pigeon to watch the screen. The screen read, "Yoo Jung-hyuk thought this, I will not give up." And so he went to the next regression. Klein inhaled sharply. Suicidal. He was thinking of jumping, but stopped. Because of Yoo Jung-hyuk? No, because of that webnovel, TWSA. Hypothesize boldly, verify carefully. I still need to confirm this. He temporarily forgot about finding the other, Klein. After watching this younger Kim Dokja more and seeing this behavior repeat, as Klein invisibly followed behind with marionettes of rats and birds, Klein began to roughly understand the situation. Kim Dokja never visited friends or family. Kim Dokja didn't chat with classmates. All he did was read his web novels on his phone, and when his state was the worst, he would read TWSA, reliable like clockwork. The Kim Dokja he knew always acted outwardly confident, but this was what was hidden beneath. Klein had discovered a passively suicidal Kim Dokja, who was coping with life and the loneliness only by reading a webnovel called 3 Ways to Survive a Ruined World. After making some preparations, Klein finally knocked on a rundown apartment door in a bad neighborhood. Yes. Who is it? A scraggly young man opened the broken door. His eyes were dull. He didn't recognize Klein at all. Ah. Klein suddenly understood something. There is no other, Klein. I'm in the past right now. This is how we met. In the logic of the real world, this would make no sense, but somehow in the dream, it oddly did. Covering his face for a moment, Klein subtly adjusted some features, such as making his jaw slightly rounder, the lines on his skin less prominent, his features less sharp. Klein had made himself look younger. Face blank, he then said, "I'm your cousin." "Yes," Kim Dokja murmured, head lowered so his bangs almost covered his eyes. He looked so young somehow, and thin. His condition wasn't good, even though he must have been in his late teens in a very early adulthood. He was young. "I have a cousin." Klein shook his suitcase subtly to draw the eye to it. "Yes," Klein explained. "Our grandmother moved to Britain some years ago after divorcing, and met my grandfather. I just moved back to Korea for university. He coughed. "As it happens, I'm looking for a place to stay. Since we're family, I was wondering if we could split the rent and room together. Of course, if you're not comfortable with this, then there is no need to accept." Kim Dokja blinked. "Which university are you going to?" he asked distantly. Klein answered nonchalantly. Kim Dokja's eyes brightened momentarily. "Ah, that's where I'm going." "I know." Klein would have to enroll himself later. Kim Dokja then looked lost. "Can I come in?" Klein said, holding up his suitcase again. "It's been a long trip, and it'd be good to introduce myself. Do you like web novels?" The young college student naively let him in after a pause, and then the conversation on Kim Dokja's couch flowed a little bit easier when they talked about isekai and transmigrations, and slowly, Kim Dokja relaxed. At the end, he finally asked, "Are you really my cousin?" Klein nodded, his face not betraying anything. Kim Dokja must have been a little suspicious, because he then said, "Can you prove it?" Immediately, his head ducked down. I'm sorry. It's just very strange. Unexpected. I suppose no one would have told me." He sounded a little bitter. "I don't know how much you know." "Don't worry. It's fine to ask. See, these are my documents." Klein showed him fake documents like a passport, and then a family tree that he had put together that looked very official and stamped. He then explained that his parents had told him about Kim Dokia after Klein planned to transfer to Korea, and somehow had gotten his address, but Klein didn't really know how. Kim Dokja's shoulders lowered. I see. He smiled then. A small, thin, but real smile. Ah, I'm sorry they didn't send a message ahead of time, Klein said apologetically. My parents didn't know how to contact you internationally, I think. No, it's all right, Kim Dokja said shyly. He scratched the back of his head. So which web novels did you like the most? World After the Fall is pretty good. I know that one. Later, when Klein had gotten himself enrolled and had paid for a dorm room in the college, there were some whispers that surrounded Kim Dokja, who clutched his books very tightly and had his shoulders somewhat hunched. When Klein never commented on it, his shoulders then gradually unfurled, and he gained more confidence. They butted elbows and talked in an increasing volume, day by day, when they walked between classes. Kim Dokja and Klein, though not quite cousins, had quickly become friends of sorts. This was surprisingly enjoyable for Klein. Kim Dokja and Klein hadn't gotten the dorm room together after all, but Klein had manipulated the circumstances so despite being in a duo, he had ended up as the lucky oddman out without a roommate. When Kim Dokja admitted falteringly one day that he was having trouble paying rent, Klein told him he could stay with him in his dorm. Are you sure? Kim Dokja asked, face hidden behind his books. He was embarrassed to ask. Klein smiled, then ruffled his hair, proud that he had gathered the courage to reach out. Yes, Klein said. I'm sure. This is what I originally came to you about, wasn't it? Besides, I was lucky enough to not have a roommate. We can ask the dorm staff to transfer you in. The dorm staff were very accommodating, and it seemed that Kim Dokja was in a state of bewilderment and astonishment at how easy it was. Life can be easy sometimes, Klein told him, and it can be hard other times. It's good to enjoy the easy days when they come. If you don't worry too much when it's unnecessary, then the days are better. Kim Dokja looked at Klein reclining on the couch. Then, today I'll cook something for both of us, Kim Dokja said with determination, rolling up his thin sleeves. It was cute. As a welcome dinner, and thank you. Klein shook his head, and pushed his cousin to the couch. I'm the one welcoming you, cousin, he said. So just sit down and relax. Klein got used to modern life again. It was strange, this was what he craved after having first transmigrated to the Fifth Era. However, now that he had it, he wasn't in turmoil, he was simply comfortable. It's nice to have the internet again. He frequently performed his role as a keyboard warrior, and now having more insight into life after all his experiences, was able to extend his casual research to further depths, understanding such odd and fascinating things about the First Era's history. Real life was sometimes stranger than fiction. He also researched some religions in depth, and noticed a strong connection to how Beyonder characteristics and pathways were structured. The Hebrew Kabbalah, Tree of Life, there are also 22 pathways of the divine, and 12 Sephirot. Did they already know, in the modern era? Some things are different, but it seems my modern Earth's knowledge of mysticism was not unfounded at all. After some weeks passed, Klein did an important divination. It seems that the nature of this dream is very strange in regards to time. Even if I spend months here, only minutes will pass in the normal dream and in reality both. Some form of time compression. Or is this just time travel? Either way, it seems like I don't have to worry about staying here for too long. Klein then looked over at his sleeping cousin, and then softly made a decision. Yes, this isn't bad for me either. After all, this was one of the main purposes of Evernight sending me into a dream to begin with. My anchors won't increase in the meantime, but this is fine. This gives me time to further subconsciously digest all the remaining characteristics, and firm up what is important to me, the essential aspects of my humanity. Klein decided to stay, and protect his cousin while he could. The years passed quickly, and while there were some tough times, he was happy. Both Klein and Kim Dokja, for the first time in a long time, had someone who would constantly watch their back. Someone who was with them during the worst times, when everything broke and went awry, and also someone who was with them to create the best times. Many moments were mundane, but important. Many days just passed lazing about together while reading and cooking. They didn't have to do much. But they were both there, together. There was one time Kim Dokia had a bad day, after visiting his mother in prison. He confessed everything, and ended up crying into Klein's shirt, who softly patted him on his head and told him his mother wouldn't define his life. Birthdays passed by, with simple but heartfelt celebrations. New Year's came and went with fireworks and clapping. There were many festivals, but most of the time, Kim Dokia and Klein both decided to stay inside and take it easy, eating home-cooked meals to celebrate the occasions. Classes were passed, and sometimes even failed, but each time at the end of the semester they would spend some money to eat out at a nice restaurant. Klein learned some board games, and would then coax Kim Dokia to play them with some of his casual college friends. Then, Klein would remark to Kim Dokia about some of these friends' idiosyncrasies fondly, as well as those of their teachers, and Kim Dokia would smile and even sometimes laugh. He once said that it was like Klein was constantly reading a novel just by watching reality. Klein had found this perspective interesting, and then was startled to be told that not everyone observed their surroundings constantly and commented on them mentally like him. "You're very observant," Kim Dokia said brightly, eyes curved. This meant he was trying to tease Klein, but his words were too admiring. "Sometimes, I wonder if you already know everything about me, and everything about the people around us too, but just don't say anything." "Ah," Klein protested. "That's not the case. People are quite complex, and I only see what's on the outside." Klein and Kim Dokia traded webnovel recommendations, and Kim Dokia eventually grew confident enough to even share his favorite webnovel with Klein, who always listened with an attentive ear. This favorite webnovel, of course, was 3 Ways to Survive a Ruined World. Over nearly 3 years, Klein heard the story of Yoo Jung-hyuk progress each night, and saw the smile on Kim Dokja's face when he rambled and talked about how that sunfish bastard would never give up. Klein heard how Kim Dokia would sometimes cheer on Yoo Jung-hyuk, sometimes hate him, sometimes be happy or sad for him, sometimes be annoyed by him, but would always devotedly follow each and every action of his. A few times during these reading and rambling sessions, Klein couldn't help but give in to the urge to ruffle the hair of his somehow cute cousin, and Kim Dokia didn't seem to mind, other than sometimes being a bit embarrassed. "You're growing up well," Klein thought to Kim Dokia, proud. Finally, the two graduated from their local college together. Klein found a new apartment outside of the college. Coincidentally, this was the same familiar apartment room he had spent all the restarts in the dream. Mrs. Stellan Sammers lived next door, and the neighbor nearby had a black cat that Klein would occasionally secretly feed. Kim Dokia stayed with him for a few days, but they both knew what would happen next. Kim Dokja's military draft arrived. When they looked together at Kim Dokja's letter and assignment, they both fell silent. "It's on the forefront," Kim Dokia said, smiling an unlucky smile then. "Klein, you were lucky. You're not fully a Korean citizen, so you get to skip it." Klein reluctantly spoke. "We won't be together, then. It'll be hard to visit on a military base." "No, I won't be able to." "Yes, it seems that way." He had gotten comfortable living like this, over the years. But he already knew. Kim Dokia of the future had once said, the military draft ended it, they had lived together for years until the military draft. This was the end. So Klein knew this would be one of the last times he would see this young, sweet, and familiar version of his cousin. "Klein, it was a good time, wasn't it?" Klein said wistfully, his lips twisting. Kim Dokia smiled too, staring at the water. "Yes. Cousin, you'll have to be strong. You'll witness many misfortunes, and you may want reality to stop being reality. But by going forward step by step, you will you will create the ending you want." Klein felt emotional. "I can't stay here forever." "Ah, it sounds like you are saying goodbye." Kim Dokia laughed, then went silent. "I'm going back to Britain for some time," Klein said heavily. "Really? You won't get a job here?" "No." "Ah, I see." Klein felt the need to explain further. "I'll be back again, sometime. I may have some difficulty remembering you. But I will always be your cousin." Kim Dokja, you are a precious person. Please always stand and fight for yourself. If it were anybody else, they would undoubtedly question or tease Klein for his words. But because it was Kim Dokja, who was used to being forgotten, he only quietly accepted it. But surprisingly, he still smiled, that small but real smile. I see. Thank you, Klein. Klein startled. The light of the sun against the river was very bright. Thank you, Klein, Kim Dokja said more softly now, for having been here with me. I will always remember it. Klein also stared at the water. I will too. Thank you, Dokja. Klein still met the young Dokja 2 more times, and also spent some time with him in the new apartment. But when Dokja had packed his bags, and left for the military draft, it was the last time. Klein sat for a long time alone by a bench nearby that same river he had first appeared at. This was the place where he had first seen the younger Kim Dokja. Now that river and suspension bridge had many more memories, but he couldn't help but remember that first time. When Kim Dokja had stared at the black water with an empty gaze, and it was only a web novel that had stopped him from inching forward. Klein then stared at the bright blue sky, the clouds slowly drifting by. Most ancient dream, is this why you brought me here? Klein sighed, then shook his head. He lifted his left hand, then after a long pause, breathing in the now familiar sense and listening to the comfortable sounds of a lively city. He snapped his fingers, and then was surrounded again by a ruined world. Chapter 9. Stupid Cousins and Outer Gods. Klein had returned to the present. Kim Dokja was still talking to his companions awkwardly in a picnic-like party scene. It was like no time had passed at all, but his cousin's back had grown bigger, and his shoulders straighter. Dokja, Klein said softly. Kim Dokja looked back at Klein while talking with Usanga, and his expression was complicated. Klein's expression was also complicated and deep. I confirmed it, Klein said, and the quiet words carried. Usanga looked between them, and then smiled calmly, respectfully stepping away. I'll give you 2 a moment. Dokja SSI, please remember to relax. Kim Dokja stepped closer. Already? He asked, surprised and on guard. Klein nodded, throat feeling thick. Yes, it only took some years. You were right. It was real. Several expressions flashed on this older Kim Dokja's face. He was shaken, but there was also hope, worry, and longing there. Most of all, there was caution. Do you remember? He asked. I just lived it. What? I just lived it. Your star stream is very strange. I went back into the past, and met you. I introduced myself as your cousin, and we lived all those years together. In the ensuing silence, Klein could hear the laughter and games of children, the sizzling of a grill, the quiet and calm chatter of the gossiping adults. Kim Dokja stared at the grass. You grew up well, Klein said awkwardly. Even though he had just seen the young Kim Dokja a day ago, talking with him was now so difficult. Kim Dokja said finally, so you aren't my cousin. The constellation that likes to switch genders says he knew it. The constellation that likes to switch genders eats some popcorn. The prisoner of the golden headband says to hush again. The demon-like judge of fire is confused by the censoring, but also feels like crying. Klein twitched. What bad timing. I forgot in the present day, we have these listeners. Not exactly, Klein said, but then added, at least not by blood. However, I do consider you my cousin, Dokja. It's best to make it very clear, with his personality. Kim Dokja nodded, but his expression was very strange. Klein found himself unable to read it. People are indeed complex, he thought, not for the first time, but now felt quite sentimental. Dokja, I can't read everyone as easily as a novel. I have no idea what you're thinking right now, after all. Kim Dokja nodded one more time, and then turned around. He went back to Usanga and continued talking like nothing had happened. Klein sighed. It will take some time. Kim Dokja, after regaining his confidence, provoked a mysterious atmosphere in the party, and revealed that his filled square was the final chapter. This caused a stir amongst the constellations. Klein had no idea what this meant. Of course, this is related to his conception of the world as a novel. The other constellations also seemed to imply, filled square, was related to the end. Then there is the existence of the most ancient dream. Does this mean that the scenarios have a built-in end? Does this dream have a time limit? Is this the reason behind the resets, to continuously extend the ending of the dream? Klein theorized. Could this be related to my role here, or did I already fulfill it? Klein decided this didn't matter. His motives for remaining here had changed. After all, this story was no longer simply a transactional exchange between him and the most ancient dream. Over the next days, Kim Dokja was in the habit of gift-giving to all the companions in the industrial complex. Lee Gilyoung and Shin Yusing got so many gadgets and odds and ends they ran around the complex like Christmas trees. Lee Jaehee got a strange trifold hat. Yu Sangga got a bracelet, but seemed perturbed. Jung Hee-won got an expensive suit, and seemed happy with it. Lee Hyung-sung got a shield, which he occasionally stroked fondly. Here, Kim Dokja told Klein abruptly, when Klein was just wondering if he would also get a gift or not, handing him a small, palm-sized item. Dokja then immediately left. Klein inspected the item. "Cousin, what did you get for me?" He wondered, amused and also worried. It was a silver pin, encrusted in a suave obsidian lining. When Klein read the description, it was an SSS-grade defensive item that would automatically tank any fatal hit once or twice. When Klein thought through the abilities he had revealed so far, the gift was rather thoughtful. This would allow him to defend against any unexpected situation then quickly teleport away. However, Klein already had a number of other defensive measures, like battling in a historic projection, using marionettes to disguise his true self, paper figurines, and on and on. And ultimately, only his consciousness was in this dream. His true body was still in Saphira Castle, sleeping. Still, Klein put the pin on the lapel of his suit, smiled, and patted it. "Still, it's nice to get a gift from my cousin. I'll protect it well." The next day, Klein's spiritual intuition rang sharply while drinking coffee outside. He dropped the cup in his hands, then flinched, staring at the 73rd Demon Realm's amber sky. What is coming? The disaster of the stars. This feels. Klein. Jung Hee-won asked, confused. A second ago, they had been chatting normally. She immediately began picking up the ceramic cup pieces, but paused when she saw Klein wasn't doing anything. What's wrong? Something big is coming, Klein said. I need to find Dokja. Be prepared. He began moving quickly. Kim Dokja had been running around relentlessly during those peaceful days, looking very busy and focused. Did he know? No, it must be impossible. Even I was taken unawares, and we still should have over a day remaining before it arrives. Klein burst into the room Kim Dokja was using as an office, busily working at something, and exclaimed, "Cousin, something big is coming, something nearly at the level of a true god." Kim Dokja looked up, then said hazily, "I know." "What? How?" Surya's chariot was damaged strangely, like something had eaten it. Kyrios and the Sword Saint also encountered it in the first Murim world. And, never mind. Klein was frustrated. This is important information. Is this why you were handing out gifts? No, first, what do you know about it? Dokja smiled. It should be an outer god. Klein shivered. It really is an outer god. There are outer gods here. He thought of a worse possibility. Did it come from outside the dream, looking for me? Which one? Does it have a name? Not exactly. They are often nameless. Nameless. That's good, that's good. There's no mother tree of desire. Klein still felt traumatized at the, "I want your child, Admiral," incident. Klein relaxed slightly. In this context of this dream, would I be considered an outer god too? This was a somewhat strange and disturbing thought. No, the relationship shouldn't be the same, as there was no barrier I pierced through. Instead, I simply drifted in while asleep and even freeloaded under the star stream's gaze. Besides, there are no sephirots or paths to covet in this dream. Instead, the nature of the dream is very self-contained. Yes, there shouldn't be any motive for other outer gods to enter here. In fact, perhaps this dream realm, being like Earth, is also somehow contained and protected within our own barrier. His cousin was staring at him, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. In any case, Klein said more calmly, we should have a day until it arrives. What is your plan? This is the first time you've been so concerned, cousin. Klein felt a sense of distance with his cousin, and tried to explain to close the gap. The danger levels are very high. If not prevented, the outcome may be difficult this time. Before, I didn't understand the situation, and now this danger is qualitatively of a different nature. However, his words felt somewhat useless. The unlucky smile on Dokja's face only grew. Your dream might end, Klein wanted to say. All this time, the dream that has been watching you would subtly protect you and ensure you can survive, but this is different. An outer god, by definition, is a powerful creature not controlled by your dream. But Kim Dokja couldn't know this yet. Cousin, how did you know about the outer god? Kim Dokja asked. Family is difficult, sometimes. Klein sighed, and said, I have an ability to divine, especially the danger levels of a situation. Currently, my spiritual intuition tells me the situation is quite bad. What is your attribute? I don't know exactly. I don't seem to have an attribute in the same way many people here do. But I can divine, teleport, and create projections of items I have possessed, among other things. What does your attribute window say? I haven't opened it. All these sharp questions came out coldly. Apparently, Dokja had a lot of patience for Klein when he full-heartedly considered him his cousin, but Klein himself had broken that illusion. Now, Dokja was unsure. Cousin, this stiff expression doesn't suit you very well. However, it was because of the emptiness lurking behind his eyes, that Klein continued answering the questions faithfully one by one, even though they instead should have been strategizing. Why not? I was only recently connected to the star stream. It didn't seem necessary. You only recently connected to the star stream? Kim Dokja asked in disbelief. This isn't a lie, but, I don't understand. Who are you? I'm Klein Moretti, your cousin, Klein said stubbornly. Normally, he would be more awkward about topics like this, but he knew the younger Dokja was a brickhead if he didn't say it properly. No, I mean, did you already have your abilities before the star stream? Yes. I obtained them in a different manner. How? It's a bit difficult to explain, but in the future, I should be able to tell you, Klein said earnestly. Klein, I promise, I will tell you one day. It is not yet the time, Klein spoke like a charlatan. Kim Dokja blew out air slowly, losing the cold expression, then gave up, dropping his forehead to the table. In their college days, Dokja had done this many times when he was frustrated, with his classmates, or his homework, for example. His cousin again looked a little cute. Cousin, you were really trying hard to act stern, Klein applauded, then secretly breathed a sigh of relief that it was over. Okay, Dokja said. You really are different again, Klein. Then, about the outer god, the plan is, he paused for a long time, looking at the ceiling now, then admitted crookedly, self-deprecatingly, well, I have no plan. I could use some help, cousin. Klein smiled, and said, this is why I originally came here. They began discussing the outer god in earnest. Speaking of, all of the listeners have been unusually quiet, Klein at one point remarked, referring to the constellations. Dokja was quiet for a moment. It's because the channels are all closed. The Dokkaebi didn't dare to come stream the outer god. The constellations were also afraid. Let's evacuate the citizens first, Klein said. Though the descent will impact the entire 73rd Demon Realm, its attention will likely be focused on this industrial complex. We can evacuate them to the Ujunghyuk industrial complex for the time being. Dokja looked surprised, then agreed. Regarding our defenses, there are not many who can stand against an outer god, Klein continued. In fact, it's better if everyone evacuates. I will stay. What? Dokja interrupted. They then had a long argument. Finally, Dokja again gave up. Use that pin well, and escape quickly if you need to, Dokja said. You can leave from here anytime, can't you? I can, Klein agreed, then added, I can also take others with me. If we all escape, all of the demon realm will collapse. We'll try stopping it first. What were you planning on doing if I didn't come here? Klein asked curiously. Kim Dokja was quiet. In the end, there was an orderly evacuation. Jung Hee-won had already warned the other main members of the complex, and so they were grouped together, prepared with their weapons and discussing plans separately. The tiny Kyrios and the giant breaking the sky sword saint were standing at the forefront, solemnly watching the sky. "This will be difficult," the sword saint said grimly. "My crazy disciple got me mixed up into this," Kyrios muttered, referring to Kim Dokja. "We were both unlucky with our disciples." Finally, the outer god came. Those that chose to stay quivered. A nothingness filled the sky. The god, the being, the entity that had come was indescribable. In the end, they didn't know how to react. The indescribable distance. The ground shivered like a fetus. Kyrios and the sword saint attacked, but were repelled. A vast eye opened. A lonely star twinkled in the sky in defiance. It was the demon king of salvation. And meanwhile, Klein stood, standing his ground and staring at the incomprehensible being. "So it's not anyone from outside of the dream," he sighed with relief. "In fact, this being still seems to be oddly suited to the dream. As if it were just a deeper layer, floating within hidden depths of the sea of subconsciousness, the dream's protection might still continue." However, the situation still did not look good. The 73rd demon realm is crying out in pain. The demon world spring is in effect. The giant story, demon world spring, is moving for the owner of the story. Kim Dokja was mumbling something. The chief narrator of the giant story, demon world spring, has started his story. The other members of the party let out a cry and fell to the ground, as if heavy shackles had suddenly pushed them to the ground. At first, Klein thought this was due to the outer god, but he realized it was not so. The story they all participated in is binding them. Kim Dokja is doing this. Klein felt something ominous. In that moment, he looked at his cousin and realized. "You lied. You had a plan all along." Lee Hyungsung shouted at Kim Dokja and asked him about the gifted shield, and Kim Dokja calmly said it was for another scenario. Lee Jae-hee wildly asked about her hat, and Kim Dokja replied similarly. Jung Hee-won, Shin Yusing. His companions were screaming and shouting at Kim Dokja not to die. Jung Hee-won screamed that she didn't want to survive like this, and that they should fight together. Klein remembered that first meeting in the past, when Kim Dokja stared at the water from the bridge with dark, fathomless eyes. His expression was a little like that now. "Please live," the demon king of salvation said to his companions. To Klein, Kim Dokja then said, "It's time. You should teleport away. This stupid. Your shoulders are broader, but did you really grow at all?" Klein, feeling unbelievably frustrated, stepped in front of his cousin. "I will handle this," Klein said. "No, I am handling it." It was like back in the demon realm, but Klein wasn't sleepy and confused anymore. He also felt very motivated. "No, cousin. Sometimes, the days can be hard, and sometimes they can be easy. The days pass better when you don't worry unnecessarily." "What are you doing?" Kim Dokja then cried out from behind, the grim mask breaking, as Klein stepped forward. "Protecting you, cousin," Klein said calmly. Blue probability sparks flew from his fingers, but he stood in front of the incomprehensible being firmly. He did not feel crazy just by seeing it. After all, Klein had already long surpassed the status of an angel. In fact, I could be considered somewhat of an incomprehensible being as well. The blue sparks grew and grew. Tentacles flew from Klein's back and attacked the outer god. The incomprehensible creature momentarily grew dumb, stopping in its advance. The spirit threads were useless due to its size, but there were many other methods. Klein. Human hands were grabbing his shoulders. They were Kim Dokja's warm hands, flinching amidst the plausibility storm. A voice shouted in his ears, "Stop. I have a way. There are many realities you must face," Klein said, while still slowly subduing the outer god, "and many misfortunes you will see. But step by step, we will create the conclusion to our own stories." Meanwhile, a white-gray fog rumbled and covered the horizon. This was not Klein's fog. He concentrated, and some gray fog spilled into the dream from the historic void, fighting against it, establishing the world's history and preventing it from disintegrating. Klein, cousin, you don't need to do this. I already understand. Some things are a bit painful sometimes, Klein continued. But that doesn't matter. If it's painful and we're still doing it, then that means it's important. So I don't mind. And cousin, in this case, the cost isn't too high. Kim Dokja's hands were gone. He was no longer behind him. Kim Dokia was already in front of Klein, and was rapidly approaching the outer god. What is he doing? No, really, the cost isn't too high for me, I was just telling you not to worry unnecessarily. The Demon King of Salvation has begun its storytelling. Did I talk for too long? Cousin, why don't you listen to me a little more? If I use fooling, will he stop, or do even more unnecessary things? Klein stared dumbly as his cousin ran at the outer god, and leapt into the air, dark wings sprouting from his back and horns growing from his black mop of hair. A light filled his body, and it was almost as if a star was rising into the sky. Wait, I can't fly. Klein realized this thought was a bit wrong, and then quickly shape-shifted into a bird and chased after his crazy cousin into the storming sky. The rest of the companions watched from below, stunned. Klein wasn't sure what happened. Suddenly, he was fighting a different god. The most ancient dream is looking at you. The most ancient dream thanks you. The most ancient dream smiles. Meanwhile, blue sparks poured off of Klein's body in the midst of a raging storm of nothingness already created by an outer god. With these sparks, the dream was telling him, your stories don't exist here. Your actions are implausible. Please stop. Are they both stupid? Klein criticized angrily. What is bad about me protecting Kim Dokja now? Why are you assigning me a role, then preventing me from doing what I want in it? The most ancient dream asks you not to interfere too much. The most ancient dream says it was a selfish wish. The most ancient dream apologizes. This stupid. Why did you give me such a stupid cousin? Klein felt unreasonably angry and upset, in a time when he needed to keep a calm focus. However, Kim Dokja was gone from sight, and the interference to his divination grew and grew until everything was static. Klein pushed back against it again and again, forcing the divination through each time. However, the interference from two strong opponents was enough to delay him. The disintegrating white-gray fog grew and grew until it encompassed everything. The 73rd demon realm shivered, and gradually broke. Klein then heard a resounding shout. Secretive plotter. I would like to make an outer world covenant with you. Klein thought then, bewildered, secretive plotter. The one who always asks me to explain my actions aloud. An outer god. What is Dokja thinking? Then the nature of the dream wavered, and Klein was momentarily pushed back into a familiar gray fog, his body twitching into wakefulness briefly, before Klein urgently pushed himself back into the dream. I need to hurry. Instead of a splintering and stormy demon realm, however, he was again surrounded by clear skies and a surprisingly intact but still ruined skyline of Seoul. What? My cousin must have had some sort of real plan after all. Rather than somehow sacrificing himself to save the situation, why couldn't he just explain it clearly? I would be much happier if he explained it one step at a time without hiding anything, he criticized. He must still be alive somehow then. His plan had something to do with secretive plotter. First, I should find out his location. His divination succeeded this time, though the sparks again bit at his fingers. Kim Dokja is in Seoul. Everything is fine. Klein, finally calming down, asked some passerbys some questions. He then discovered this. 3 years had passed in a wink. Time really works rather strangely in this dream, Klein lampooned, but was upset. Finally, he stood still, and said to the sky, don't do that again. There was no response. When Klein went to the center of Seoul, he discovered a familiar metallic complex there sitting as if it always belonged. This was the Kim Dokja industrial complex from the 73rd demon realm. He wandered around the complex then, looking for an entrance or any familiar faces. Finally, he found one, and waved casually. Jung Hee-won called his name from on top of the walls of the industrial complex. Klein Moretti, is that you? Klein brightened, and snapping his fingers, directly teleported in front of her. He smiled. Hwan SSI, it's me. I hope you have been doing well. Klein then explained everything without hesitation, leaving out the parts related to the gray fog. She looked shocked, then moved. I'm glad you're alive, Klein. We didn't know what happened after you both disappeared. And Kim Dokja. What's the situation? Klein asked. Isn't Kim Dokja here? Ah, well, Dokja SSI also returned some days ago, and, well, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity to talk, Jung Hee-won said somewhat nervously, which was uncharacteristic. Everyone was eating dinner right now, I can lead you to them. Deeper into the complex they went. Klein was surprised to see familiar faces he had just seen hours ago, but all of their expressions were strange as they stared at him. There was Han Suying, Lee Jae-hee, Shin Yusing, Lee Gil-young, Lee Hyung-sung, Yu Sang-ga was missing. It's you, Yu Jung-hyuk stood immediately, holding the handle of his sword. Wait, don't knock him out. Jung Hee-won blurted. He's more reasonable than Dokja SSI. We all would have done the same thing in his position, if we could. Yu Jung-hyuk's concerns were very different, however. His eyes narrowed. Who are you? Klein frowned. I'm Klein, Dokja's cousin. I let it go because of that for so long. Who are you? Hey, you crazy bastard, Han Suying said tensely, pushing the protagonist's arm down. This isn't the time for that. Kim Dokja just came back, and his cousin now is back too. We can celebrate instead. Though, Klein, you could explain a little. I'm not sure. After that outer god came, I arrived in Seoul again, 3 years later. To me, it was as if no time passed at all. What? Really? Before it happened, I heard Kim Dokja make an outer world covenant. It might be related to that. Yu Jung-hyuk's grip on his sword tightened again, but he was now successfully distracted. Klein was sympathetic. I understand. Your boyfriend, crush, something suddenly disappeared for 3 years after looking like he was dying. Then his cousin randomly appears again one day. I would be suspicious too. However, this time I am really innocent. Finally, Klein finally sat down, and caught up with all that had happened in the last few years, feeling that it was surreal. They were beating the scenarios well, the adults told him calmly, as if indicating he should stay out of it. The last scenario had been a returnee disaster scenario. Kim Dokja had returned as an ugly squid, the children told him eagerly. A squid, Klein repeated skeptically, but didn't show it in his face or voice. Yes, a squid. Shin Yusing, is this part of you continuously calling Kim Dokja ugly? Yeah, Kim Dokja was really ugly then, wasn't he? Han Suying snorted. A squid is a squid, after all. I told you Jung-hyuk he wasn't actually a juicy, but he still beat him up, Shin Yusing said, shaking her head. Then he knocked out Hung. Lee Gil-young piped up, somehow happy. So now Hung is sleeping for a long time. Yes. Klein rapidly grew more concerned, and glanced around the table. We drugged him, Han Suyun said bluntly, forking some lettuce into her mouth casually. Now he can't go anywhere. Klein coughed. This situation is a bit. Can I see my cousin? He asked finally. After some arguing and calm persuasion, Klein finally gained permission to visit his cousin. Like a certain fairy tale princess, Kim Dokja was locked up in the highest tower of the complex, and there was a strong ward around the room. Klein looked at his sleeping and drugged cousin for a long time. Then he sighed. When I said they cared about you, this wasn't what I intended. Even if I understand, I think they went a little too far. Kim Dokja's sleeping face softly puffed breaths of air in and out. He somehow looked immensely at peace. It was somehow satisfying just to look at him. He looked young, but also matured. Klein could even imagine him having become wiser. It would be good if he always rested this way. Did 3 years also pass for him, or did he somehow skip it like me? Klein coughed, and found that he didn't have the heart to take out the IV needle either. Yes, perhaps it wouldn't be bad if my cousin stayed put for a little bit. Thus Klein also became guilty by association. He chatted with the other companions over the next weeks, and quickly became comfortable with them again, particularly Han Suying, who was always blunt and had already treated him like a friend 3 years ago. He fulfilled the scenarios with them, and tried to make the dangerous situations somewhat less dangerous. Yoo Jung-hyuk clearly still didn't like him, but this was fine. Sometimes, Klein would go with the children to visit the top tower, and they would bicker, and then intently stare at Kim Dokja, almost to the point where it was disturbing. Sometimes, Klein would also talk to Dokja. Cousin, this dream is sometimes quite annoying. I don't understand the role I am supposed to play here, or even if I was meant to have one. However, the more I think about it, this is life, isn't it? None of us understand our roles or purposes, so we create them. Back home, there are many people I need to protect. If I had lost, even if the world wouldn't end, many more lives would be destroyed. I chose this because I trusted myself, in the end. Sometimes, living is the harder choice. You have to move day by day, eat, act, work, even if you do it once, it isn't enough. You have to do it over and over again. Some days are tough, but then some days are easy. When you find the easy days, you have to keep living for them, and then everything will become easier. I really enjoyed the time I spent with you in college. I don't want you to die, cousin. Then, unfortunately, Kim Dokja woke up only some days after that, when some foolhardy incarnations raided the complex and tried to steal their precious, moonlit empress. After everyone ran back to stop Kim Dokja's escape, Klein found him first, exploring the industrial complex, lost and opening doors randomly. Kim Dokja's eyes had widened when he saw Klein, but then his head dropped slightly, and he said sincerely, "Thank you, cousin. I enjoyed that time with you too. Ah, did you hear everything I said while you were sleeping?" Klein was embarrassed, but smiled, and patted Dokja on the head. Dokja startled, surprised. Good, that's good. You are really growing up well now. Just don't do what you did earlier again, and explain things more clearly next time, he advised. Dokja was too embarrassed by this, ducking his head and then shrugging off his hand. Klein was also somewhat embarrassed, but hid it better. Why did my cousin suddenly grow normal sensibilities? He lampooned. He didn't mind this before. Well, I suppose he is a full adult now. But I'm still technically older. The two cousins stared at each other awkwardly. Still, it felt like the wall between them had begun to mend. So, then Han Suying and Lee Hyung-sung also caught up, and had many things to say to Dokja. Chapter 10, The End. Many things happened after that. There was a war with the Olympus nebulae, and the scenarios rapidly advanced forward. They reached an isle of reincarnators, in which every member of the team spent years and years as someone else, except for Kim Dokja and Klein. On this isle, Klein stood in front of the wall of samsara, and did an important divination. The most ancient dream is more complex than I thought, Klein was startled. This goes quite deep. The dream is very loop-like. Is a wall so relevant to the most ancient dream? I see. After many more events, came main scenario 80, the War of Good and Evil. Klein was amused when two sides contested Kim Dokja's morality, teasing apart the morality of every action his cousin had ever performed in the scenarios. Luckily, Kim Dokja was not too affected by this, but did appear somewhat embarrassed in front of the demon-like judge of fire, the angel, Uriel, who in the end Klein thought had a quite sweet nature, at least towards Kim Dokja's company. And that was another thing. They had all banded together as Kim Dokja's company, an official nebula before the constellations, except most members were human. Klein was in it, Kim Dokja of course was in it, even Yoo Jung-hyuk was in it. As well as Yoo Sang-ga, who had, eventually emerged out of Kim Dokja's, brain, Jung Hee-won, the kids, Lee Hyung-sung, and Han Soo-young. It was quite the enjoyable crew, and together with Klein's help, they somehow were able to prevent Kim Dokja from sort of killing himself all the time, and to instead explain things more clearly. One day, Kim Dokja even explained to everyone about them being characters in a novel, with notable exceptions, and the 3 ways of survival. Everyone took it differently, but Yoo Jung-hyuk was especially upset. Klein wasn't too bothered. However, when Kim Dokja began explaining what had happened in the 3 years he was gone in the 1864th regression, Everyone stared at him and could barely make sense of it. 999th regression this, 1864th regression that, even Klein had to puzzle it out for quite a while to sort it out. When he realized Kim Dokja had believed this was the third regression, he understood the confusion. However, meanwhile, Klein had already experienced over 1,000 regressions linearly as resets, without knowing it, uninvolved with Yu Junghyuk. Yes, this is why the dream reset over 1,000 times, each time at somewhat random points. Each point was related to Yu Junghyuk's death. He confirmed this in a divination. Occasionally, Klein heard prayers from the Tarot Club, both major and minor arcana, and he fondly caught up on their progress. In the years he had been in the past with the younger Kim Dokja, he hadn't heard the prayers at all, but he had missed them. Furs has indeed learned to act like a charlatan. Klein wondered if she learned this from Mr. Fool or Mr. World. Leonard still sends me poems occasionally. Some are of worse quality, and others are mediocre. His creativity is improving. Klein chuckled, remembering the days when, if asked to write a poem, Leonard would only blankly stare or try to secretly recite from a book on his desk. Ms. Justice is traveling frequently with Susie. Susie is also now giving therapy sessions on her own. Klein paused on this for a long time. He caught up this way by getting snatches and glimpses of their lives. The prayers were rare, however, because he had warned them not to use his name too often, to prevent celestial worthies' interference. Now, however, it was fine. After some thought, he mocked up Mr. World in an empty room of the industrial complex, filling the room with an illusion of gray fog. Mr. World kneeled, but was slumped in a tired way, and then said, "Mr. Fool is recovering. You may freely send prayers again for a time." Klein as the Fool then sent the message to the Tarot Club's major arcana, passing the prayer out of the dream then through Saphira Castle. In that moment, the door swung open, and Kim Dokja stepped in. Klein, he then startled, and his eyes widened at the cult-like scene. For a long time, Klein and Kim Dokja stared at each other. More accurately, Kim Dokja stared at the hooded Mr. World, and then at the gray fog-enshrouded Klein, who was sitting on a throne largely hidden from sight. A flood of prayers then hit Klein, multiple whispers being interpreted at once by the various wormy bits of Klein, each praising his name. "Wait, not now." Klein coughed, he snapped his fingers, and the fog, Mr. World, the altar, the throne, and everything unusual were now gone. He stood as if nothing had happened. "Yes?" Klein asked Dokja, face blank. "Clown is indeed useful, ehm." His cousin looked over the now clean scene one more time, and said slowly, "Klein. Cousin. I came to get you to discuss the next scenario." The fourth wall must have been turned on very strongly, as Klein didn't detect anything unusual from his cousin's expression. Of course. Lead the way." His cousin then led him to the others and didn't comment about anything. The walk was very silent. Each step was painful. Fuck. Klein felt like slamming his head against a wall, he was so embarrassed. The constellation that likes to switch genders is laughing at you. 600 coins have been sponsored. At the door to where the other members of Kim Dokja's company were, Dokja finally paused. He placed his hand teasingly on the knob. "Should I help spread your religion, cousin?" "No." Klein exclaimed without realizing it, and grabbed Dokja's wrist to stop him. Please don't mention anything to them." His cousin laughed. A playful smile then lit on his face, and his eyes looked brighter. Klein stared, momentarily stunned. It had been so long since he saw him laugh. "No, I only ever saw it in the past, back in college." "Don't worry," Kim Dokja said, then shrugged off his grip and turned the knob. "Your smile is not very reassuring, cousin," Klein thought nervously then. "The constellation that likes to switch genders says, 'Praise the Fool.' 500 coins have been sponsored." "Praise the Fool," Dokja murmured, "sing song." "This fellow," Klein lampooned. From his ears, he was already constantly hearing a ringing of, "Praise the Fool. Praise the Fool." Klein suddenly regretted all his life choices. The door finally opened. Still, somehow, Kim Dokja ended up dying again. Again, the company was flung into the terrible uncertainty of whether he was alive or not. The children kept capturing random creatures during the scenarios, and asking them if they were Dokja. Klein only was able to get them to stop after doing a divination, and reassuring everyone that Kim Dokja was in fact alive. This proved true when they came to main scenario 94, reenacting the journey to the west. Klein had felt somewhat emotional about this story, because it had been a cornerstone staple of his childhood education. The party was even more emotional when a mysterious and somewhat faceless Watcher of Light and Darkness joined their acting team last minute. Based on his mannerisms, everyone guessed this was Kim Dokja. Kim Dokja's company had become phenomenal actors, however, because while they knew the constellation playing Sun Wukong was Dokja, they merely pampered him and played along, pretending to not know he was Kim Dokja. Sun Wukong, don't move, Klein said as the longevity monk, somewhat teasingly. It's good to rest when you can. For example, relaxing freely on days like this is quite good, don't you think? His cousin twitched. The other companions had similar sentiments, and used the real Monkey King's approval of this. Sun Wukong's pamperedness as an excuse to disguise their actions. The prisoner of the golden headband was raining down coins on them constantly, and Klein finally understood the wonder of being very popular with the constellations, money. However, I cannot bring this money home with me, he thought regretfully. And it is invisible too, lacking a distinct and lovable scent. It lacks the romanticism of paper notes, flush in a wallet. Han Suying snorted when he told her his thoughts. Should a longevity monk be thinking of such things? She said. Klein considered. Every monk should always be prepared for potential bankruptcy. After all, this problem could be very serious. For example, if the abbey loses money, then I can no longer eat well, and then I can no longer meditate. He thought he played his role very well. Hey, why don't you then? Hey, Sun Wukong. What are you doing? More Yogos had arrived in a new side mission, and Sun Wukong was bargaining and threatening for their lives. Sun Wukong, are you adopting more children? Klein asked, amused, adopting a very pious and respectful tone. Yes, so don't bug me, said Sun Wukong, grumpily. Klein suppressed his smile. Watching Dokja's performance in adopting the outer creatures, the Yogos, until they trailed behind the company in a mass parade, suddenly, Klein realized why his cousin was so popular with the constellations. Kim Dokja has the talent of drawing emotions from people, just by watching him. Even this made Klein feel somewhat melancholic. It is because he is a person who feels a lot, but hides it. This is not good for him. After finally reuniting and revealing his identity to everyone, Kim Dokja somehow got them into a fight against secretive plotter and had to be saved by the prisoner of the golden headband, the Monkey King himself. Meanwhile, the main scenario count ticked upwards and they rapidly approached scenario 100. Afterwards, Kim Dokja's company understandably rioted and kidnapped him for a picnic, forcing him to eat well and talk to everyone. He even had a scenario with a death penalty if Dokja didn't talk to everyone once. This is a little excessive, Klein lampooned. When it was Klein's turn, he was happy to see his cousin eating well and taking a break again. No, am I guilty by association again? He coughed. They chatted for some time, about this and that, like the times they shared in university, and their adventures in the apocalypse. Klein confessed he now didn't mind this apocalypse as much as he once did, and found himself explaining the resets. Dokja, Klein said finally, seriously. Be careful. Don't give up on yourself. Do you know something? Dokja asked, finally. I know. No matter what you see, just keep my words in mind. Don't give up on yourself. Dokja hesitated, then nodded, smiling. Why would I? He said, somewhat sardonically. His smile was an unlucky smile. In scenario 99, the Dokkaebi Bureau launched a big arc to escape to another world line with the major constellations, and there was a big fight. Coins turned into probability, and chicken scratch like a child's crayon drawing scribbles turned into a bomb the Dokkaebi summoned. Still, Kim Dokja's company fought and survived. Scenario 100 came. Dokja's pupils were shaking, and his mouth was twisted. He laughed dryly. He had just come back from the train station, after wanting to almost kill his younger self. Luckily, his companions had stopped him. Klein, Dokja said, in a train station in the middle of nowhere, just as everyone had left, and he was about to split himself in two. Klein sat in one of the rocky seats, a top hat on the seat next to him, and a cane in his hands. To the companions, he had snapped and created an illusion of Kim Dokja and Klein returning, giving them time to talk. Dokja, Klein said quietly. Don't worry. It will be all right. I told you not to give up on yourself. Dokja laughed. You always say things like that. But cousin, didn't you know? Didn't you know? It's all a... Despair danced in his eyes. This was the despair of reality. Klein smiled sadly at his cousin. Again, he remembered the bridge and the dark look. It's all a dream, cousin, Kim Dokja said hoarsely and bitterly. He then opened and closed his mouth again uselessly, as if having more words to speak, but finding himself unable to speak them. Klein nodded. He had known that this was a dream from the beginning, after all. However, that did not mean it was not also reality. So it would always come to this, yes, more than his disposition alone, this is the nature of the dream itself. Klein had divined this all. Long ago, in Saphira Castle, Kim Dokja was the most ancient dream, or at least, the most ancient dream was a form of Kim Dokja. Over the years, however, especially at the Wall of Samsara, he had finally understood what his divination had meant, as well as his presence here. My role here was that child's will, Kim Dokja's will. I had already accidentally drifted into this dream while asleep, another reality, another history, and that child chose to put me in the star stream and made me Kim Dokja's cousin in the most recent regression. Somehow, that resulted in a time loop that made it real, of my own volition. Why? Had that child seen my careful and humble home life, and desired it? Or had he known I was accidentally freeloading off his dream, using it to stabilize myself, and so he put me to work to protect himself? Either way, this is the critical moment, in the end. How bewildering, Klein murmured, letting many of the thoughts that had been bubbling in his head be released aloud now. In the logic of this dream, it seems that everyone is a god. Kim Dokja didn't speak. His expression was quite bad, worse than Klein had ever seen it before, even at that moment by the bridge. By now, Kim Dokja already knew everything. That did not mean his cousin understood it, however, or had come to terms with it. This world was created in your head, Klein explained, and has the characteristics of the snake of fate, of omniscience, and other aspects of the most ancient one combined. In fact, in this world, you are referred to as the most ancient dream. By watching this world, you create it. By having read this world and imagined it, you created it. Yet, the you that existed in this world was an ordinary person written into a novel, and yet, simultaneously, you are the god here. In the train station, there are also signs of other word lines that have been similarly created, from solely the imagination of an author and a reader. Klein frowned. Perhaps, I am the same way. Klein was unsettled. After stepping into this dream that was also real, he was unsure if his mentality had been hardened or strengthened, or if it had been shaken at its foundations. No, it's not the time to have an existential crisis. After all, there are responsibilities I must live up to, and real people I must protect. His gaze settled on Kim Dokja, his cousin, who looked as if he was falling apart. His cousin. This person is a person I want to protect. Klein stepped forward, and said softly. Dokja, even if the world is like this, that's not your fault. Somehow, the world was just built like this, and we only have to do our best to live in it. Aren't there people here you care about? Han Suying, Yu Junghyuk, Lee Jaehee, Lee Gilyung, and Shin Yusing. The story you were reading and loved enough to create a world out of it. You always loved to talk about it, even before then. Klein's words were very sincere. I also have people that I love, Klein said, embarrassed. Even if I am not truly your cousin, I would like to be your cousin, for example. I also have people back home. Melissa and Benson, Leonard, Sharon and Marich, the Tarot Club, Mr. Azak who always guided and mentored me. And there's other things, too. For example, the taste of a daisy pie, the chatter of people, butternut squash stew with perfectly salted meat. As Klein talked on, listing more dishes, he felt his appetite begin to grow. Kim Dokia, surprisingly, barked a laugh, wiping at his face. You do really like food, Klein, Kim Dokja said, with his small, thin, but real smile. He looked more normal with that smile, not that dramatic and heartbreaking demon king of salvation, the wise and seclusive watcher of light and darkness, or the mysterious and powerful prophet that always wore the smile of a scammer. Instead, he just looked like Dokja. Like the younger Kim Dokja, but with broader shoulders, more grown after facing the world again and again. Yes, Klein said, smiling in return. These are the things that keep my humanity. They are the things that I find important, and live for. I don't have anything like that, though. I'm just a reader, Kim Dokja confessed. Klein was quiet. You constantly have a wall around you. Even if you have it, you won't let it touch you. Sometimes, people are indeed quite complex, he lampooned. This isn't something you have to already know, Klein finally said. You only have to keep trying, until you figure it out, piece by piece. After a pause, Kim Dokja nodded, then agreed. Klein hesitated. There was one more thing Klein had divined, when looking at the wall of samsara. The reason why Klein had been able to divine the future, though divination truly did not read the future, but instead spiritual imprints left behind in the past, was because all of this had already repeated in the past, but without Klein's presence. He had divined Kim Dokja becoming the most ancient dream, and then becoming a small child after spreading himself into the dream, again and again. The same child who was in the train station, both creating and watching this world through his imagination, only to be reborn through confrontation and trauma again and again. Klein's presence here was a deviation from that fate. Perhaps this was what the most ancient dream wished for, but being Kim Dokja, had been unable to grasp it directly, and even fought Klein once for trying to save him. Come back with me, Klein said. The word line will still continue existing without you observing it directly. I have a way. Kim Dokja nodded again, and then believing him, wordlessly took his offered hand. Klein smiled. My cousin is very cute again. While walking away from the train and into the darkness, Klein split off a small part of himself, and grafted it to the dream in the most ancient dream's role. This was a small sacrifice, only causing him a little pain. After some time, the worms would regenerate, and meanwhile, a mysterious child that wasn't quite Kim Dokja would watch and guard this world. In this way, Klein broke the never-ending cycle of the most ancient dream. And so Klein and Kim Dokja returned to their reality, the dream that carried on this universe. Later, Kim Dokja asked Klein how he knew so much. Klein was embarrassed, and scratched at his cheek. He cleared his throat. However, since this was a different reality, and he had already seen Kim Dokja, his cousin, in his worst state, Klein bravely said. Ah, do you remember the Mr. Fool I preached about? In fact, this is me. In order to stabilize myself as a god, I had decided to use the people of your world as anchors. I happened to become a god recently, due to the circumstances of the world I'm from, and so. The explanation was very long, and very confusing to someone who hadn't been involved in the events, much like how Kim Dokja's explanation about Yu Junghyuk's 999th regression and outer gods had also once sounded bizarre and incomprehensible to Klein. Klein also explained how he had accidentally drifted into Kim Dokja's dream and why everything had happened the way it had. So yes, I am a god, too, cousin, he finished, awkwardly. Kim Dokja stared at him for a very long time, and then finally said. Ah, so that's how it was. Kim Dokja's lips twitched, and then he took out an unknown slip of paper from his pocket. Playfully, while Klein's eyes widened, he began reciting. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. The mysterious ruler above the gray fog. The king of yellow and black that wields good luck. Is that you? Kim Dokja asked, smiling. How did you know? Klein asked, astonished. I'm the most ancient dream, remember? I'm omniscient. And oh, you left this in your room. Klein laughed. Back in Saphira Castle, the fool's foggy figure wavered and shifted again. This time, when the fool's body solidified into a human shape with brown eyes and a somewhat deep outline, after some minutes, the form did not waver again, remaining insistently human, without tentacles or other abnormalities. Finally, Klein snapped his fingers, and opened his eyes. In front of him, a rich variety of desserts, meals, and pies adorned the stone table of Saphira Castle. The rich scents wafted and swam appetizingly, and slowly, Klein took a bite. I'm fully stable. He stood rapidly, and though his body in reality wasn't human at all like in the dream, he stretched and tested his body, and then even took out life's cane from the junk pile for a few test swings. Very good. Very solid. Not once did his skin twitch or his identity ripple. Klein's lip then twitched, remembering when his cane had fallen, and pointed to Kim Dokja. He had asked, "How do I wake up?" In the end, all it had taken was Kim Dokja reciting his honorific name. Without realizing it, in that moment, his cousin had granted him a powerful and unopinionated anchor that extended even outside the dream, like a reader that would always calmly observe and understand events without interrupting. Klein then sat in his throne at the head of the long stone table, feeling very dignified, and readied himself to call the Tarot Club. Coincidentally, or rather, not so coincidentally, it was almost 3 p.m. on a Monday. The minutes ticked by. Klein vanished away the food, and then enjoyed the comfortable feeling of the chair. He called over a special guest, explaining the situation, and wrapped them in a deep fog near the other end of the table, nearby where the fake Mr. World's seat sat empty. The guest was at first perplexed, but then went along with it, bemused. They chatted briefly, and the last minutes passed quickly. Wait. He almost forgot to call a puppet for Mr. World, but remembered at the last moment. The guest teased him for this, and Klein coughed. Never mind that. Anyway, get ready. Remember your tarot card, and remember to call me Mr. Fool. Yes, Mr. Fool. The gray fog flickered. Everything was then quiet. It was now 3 p.m. Klein finally drummed his fingers against the table, and smiled. After so long, he was back. The fool has now awakened. Epilogue. For anybody clicking into this story from the last chapter, don't read this story without completing both the LoTM and ORV novels. For everybody else, thanks for reading my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Praise the Fool. Epilogue. The Tarot Club had a new member. Of course, this was not the first thought that ran through the Tarot Club's mind as they arrived in the grey fog of Saphira Castle at 3 p.m. on a Monday. Their first thought was, the fool is awake. After 6 long years, a familiar drumming tapped the stone table. A mysterious gray fog surrounded a figure in a top hat and suit. A subtle smile was revealed. On the lapel of his suit, there was a gleaming silver pin lined in black. The Tarot Club members all happily stood up and recited, "Praise the Fool," except for the one, new, conspicuous member who remained sitting down. "As you can see, I am awake," the fool announced calmly. "Yes, after 6 years, the fool is finally back for us. Praise the Fool." Audrey Hall, Ms. Justice, thought happily. Klein is back. Leonard thought, looking at Mr. World. He squinted. And who is that fellow there beside him? Black hair, somewhat unusual elvish features, wrapped densely in fog, a white coat. This will help with the evil gods, Catalia thought with quiet relief, pushing her amethyst glasses. Oh, good, Furzwall thought, secretly sighing. Maybe I won't have to do so much work now. She dreamed of days leisurely drinking wine and writing, unlike the recent years where she had been running around to help stop the apocalypse. She then glanced at Mr. World nervously. Or will there be more work? I hope German Sparrow won't be mad about the love triangle I added about him to my writing, that was already years ago, anyway. Her friend, Zio Derecha, glanced around. It's good Mr. Fool is back. Once again, I feel a little outclassed. Mr. Moon, Emlyn White, was excited. We will be the saviors of the world. The time is coming. Oh, Earth Mother, I mean, Mr. Fool. Mr. Hanged Man, Alger Wilson, silently looked at the fool, thinking, praise the fool. The fool is indeed very strong. I made the right choice. This seems to be the moment when he has finally regained his full strength. Alger felt somewhat fearful and nostalgic, remembering how the fool had grown in power step by step. Alger's face, however, was like stone. He also knew that the full awakening would be a great boon. Little Sun, of course, was also very happy with the development. The City of Silver is doing well thanks to Mr. Fool and Mr. World. He looked forward to reporting on the progress of the Church of the Fool. Ms. Justice then stood proudly, and began the ritual of greeting each member of the Tarot Club. This time, she went in order from oldest to newest, out of courtesy, and paused on the mysterious recent member. "And you are?" Audrey asked, with a perfect smile. Her green eyes were bright. In the past years, she had sometimes slipped in this ritual, but now she felt excited to resume it in front of Mr. Fool. "Yu Junghyuk," said the figure nonchalantly. There was an awkward silence. Mr. Fool coughed. "Mr. Wheel of Fortune," he corrected. "Mr. Wheel of Fortune," Audrey greeted without hesitation. She then turned to the head of the table, and curtsied deeply, and finally, "Mr. Fool." Her smile turned deep. The Tarot Club then waited, knowing this would be an usual session. "Regarding the missions I assigned," the Fool began. The Tarot Club slowly caught up. The new member was a little strange, but now the world seemed a little brighter after Mr. Fool had woken up. The Tarot Club was stronger than before, and they had made many achievements, but it had at times been difficult. Now, their chances at fighting against a ruined world had improved, and hope had been raised in their hearts. After all, there were 3 ways to survive a ruined world. Mr. Fool is back. The gray fog flickered, and a proud smile shone on Mr. Fool's face. On the other side of the table, the newest member, Mr. Wheel of Fortune, also known as Kim Dokja, the most ancient dream, and Klein's cousin, smiled back through the gray fog. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.